Greetings, dear listeners. This is Jeff, and you are tuning into Midnight Horror Stories. It's 2 a.m., the hour when the line between dreams and reality is at its thinnest. Tonight, I hold a special letter in my hand, not an email, not a text message, but a real handwritten letter sent to our station from a small town on the outskirts. The sender left no name, only a scrawled message in the corner of the envelope. Please tell this story. Everyone needs to know. I don't know if you believe in the supernatural, but after reading what this person wrote, I must admit there are things in this life that science cannot explain. All right, turn off your lights, pour yourself a drink, and listen. Dear show, I'm writing these lines with trembling hands. I don't know if anyone will believe me, but I need to tell it. I need to warn everyone about that house, about that door. It all started with a harmless habit of mine, talking in my sleep. I've been a sleep talker since I was a child. Anyone who's shared a house with me knows this. My parents, siblings, friends, and especially my exes, they were the ones who had to endure it the most. But nobody ever really minded, because most of what I said was either nonsensical or silly. There were a few classic lines like, "Too many helicopters in the swimming pool," or "My balloon has the wrong feet." These were things people would laugh about the next morning, never getting upset. One day at work, everyone was discussing sleep, and colleagues competed to tell their weirdest dreams. I chimed in, boasting about my sleep talking. Everyone burst out laughing as I listed the crazy things I'd blurted out in deep sleep. Bill, a colleague, laughed so hard he was gasping for air. After catching his breath, he told me I should keep a voice recorder next to me while I slept and bring it to the office the next morning for everyone to listen to. Honestly, I thought it was a good idea. That night, I downloaded a pretty good recording app on my phone and placed the device on my nightstand before bed. Living alone, there was no other way for me to know what I was saying in my sleep, so I was quite eager to see what I'd capture. This would be an entertaining way to start my boring mornings. For 2 months, I recorded many great segments. One night, I kept screaming continuously as if running from something in a dream, but after a few minutes, I said, "The fridge is broken." I couldn't stop laughing when I listened back. My colleagues did too when I played it for them. Then, at some point, the app started recording unsettling things. While listening back repeatedly to find funny parts, I suddenly heard a very loud noise. It sounded like a door being slammed shut very forcefully. Hearing that, my heart almost stopped. I wondered if an intruder had entered the house. My house is a small cottage on the outskirts of town. I bought it cheaply because of its remote location and old age. Because of this, some parts of the house are quite antiquated. I knew that after hearing the recording, only 2 doors were sturdy enough to make such a loud noise: the attic door and the basement door. The basement and the attic. I always felt a shiver down my spine about these 2 places. As a child, I never dared to go near them. Even as an adult, it was the same. They scared me, and those 2 places in my house were even more frightening. There was something about their oldness that made them more sinister. Despite my fear, I had to be sure no one was in the house. I crawled out of bed and went straight to the basement, as the basement door was closer to my bedroom. I hesitated, opened the door, and descended into the depths of the house. I was nervous but craved reassurance. The basement was empty. I quickly ran back up to the first floor and then continued upstairs. When I reached the attic door, I stopped. If the basement had given me goosebumps, the attic was infinitely worse. Perhaps it was because they had always been the biggest unknowns to me. In my entire life, I had only been in the attic once to help my dad bring down Christmas decorations. Even then, I was scared. Because of this obsession, I had installed a deadbolt on the attic door when I moved in. It sounds silly, but it helped me sleep better every night. Looking at the door, I realized the deadbolt was still locked. Perhaps an intruder had entered, left, and locked it again, but at least I knew they weren't in there now. This was a reason for me not to have to go in and check. I went back downstairs and pushed the thought of that noise out of my head. Forgetting about the loud noise, I continued recording every night, hoping to catch more funny sleep talking. I did catch some, but not the silly, funny kind as before. The night after I recorded the noise, the only thing I said all night was, "Where are you?" I didn't pay much attention, as I often said similar things in my sleep. It wasn't until I listened to the recording from the next night that I started to worry. I said the exact same phrase, "Where are you?" But this time, it was followed by a strange, static-like noise. It was a bit odd, but I put it down to coincidence and a malfunctioning device. I soon discovered it wasn't due to either of those reasons. Every night after that, I recorded almost the same thing. I would ask, "Where are you?" And then there would be that static noise. I couldn't explain it, and it puzzled me greatly. I played it for my colleagues, but they didn't understand either. I considered stopping the recordings, but not knowing what was happening felt even more unsettling. I wanted to get to the bottom of it. Then one night, I captured something different. Listening carefully to the audio, I heard two distinct things. For about 2 minutes of the recording, there were footsteps in the background, as if someone was pacing. Very faint, but definitely there. The second thing I heard was myself asking the familiar question, "Where are you?" But this time, I received an answer. It was a low whisper, but I still clearly heard what it said. "I'm in the attic." Utterly terrified by my discovery, I set up the app again the next night. I also placed 2 more digital cameras, one in my room and one pointed towards the attic door. After setting up the light levels for each camera, I felt confident in my approach. I didn't have time to get involved in this nonsense, so I just wanted to resolve it as soon as possible. Unfortunately, things weren't that simple. I slept through the night as usual but had a strange dream. In the dream, I was home. I was sitting on the sofa watching TV when I heard scratching sounds from upstairs. Naturally, I thought it was mice, but as I sat there, the noise grew louder and louder. Eventually, it turned into a terrible knocking sound on a door. At that point, I stood up to investigate. I went up to the attic door and the noise stopped completely. I stood there for a while, waiting for it to start again, but it didn't. Complete silence for a few minutes, then without warning, a loud click broke the tension. The deadbolt opened by itself, and right then, I woke up to the sound of my alarm. I quickly jumped up and grabbed my cameras and phone. I was eager to see what they had captured. There was something, but it only left me with more questions. In the middle of the audio on both my phone and the in-room camera, I heard, "Where are you?" There was no answer and no static, but there was a loud noise, similar to what I had captured before. Only clearer, it was definitely the sound of a door slamming shut. I quickly grabbed the second camera and reviewed the footage. The attic door hadn't opened at all. Instead, I heard the noise in the background, very loud. Based on the volume in each clip, it seemed to be the basement door. After scanning the rest of the footage and seeing nothing else unusual, I decided to check the basement once more. With nerves stretched and mixed with adrenaline, I ran to the basement door and yanked it wide open. I rushed down and flicked on the light. I was fed up and a little annoyed, thinking someone was somehow playing a prank on me for laughs. However, when the room lit up, I was greeted by the familiar sight of an empty basement completely empty. No intruder and no answers. Frustrated, I went to work and tried not to think about my predicament. That proved to be a difficult task. I kept replaying different scenarios in my head all day at work, but none of them made sense. The only logical, albeit somewhat absurd, explanation I could come up with was that a ghost was bothering me. I didn't want to believe that idea, but I was running out of options. I tried talking to my colleagues again, hoping they would say there was nothing to worry about, but I got the opposite. One colleague told me to call the police and have them check for signs of a break-in. Another told me I should stay at a friend's house. Bill told me to abandon the house and run as far as I could. He was only joking, but it didn't make me feel any better. Things got even stranger when I got home that day. Opening the front door of the cottage, I walked in and put my coat on the sofa. Then I plopped down to relax. As soon as I sat, I heard the loud noise again, clear as day. It was the same sound as in the recording and on the camera. But this time, I was hearing it live. I jumped up and looked straight towards the basement door. I could see it from the sofa. It had been in my line of sight the whole time. Although I wasn't looking directly at it, I was quite sure it hadn't moved. Nevertheless, the sound definitely came from that direction. Frightened but curious, I decided to go check. I cautiously approached and observed the door. There were no signs that it had just been slammed shut. The wood around the door was intact, and the floor below had no scuff marks. I opened it and went down the creaky old stairs to check the basement for the third time. After reaching the bottom, I turned on the light. I expected to see nothing, just like the previous times. As I scanned my eyes from left to right, I saw almost nothing. However, after looking again, I realized something was wrong. In the middle of the farthest wall, there was a door. A chill ran down my spine. My basement didn't have any doors, I was sure of that. I knew this even before I bought the house, nearly a year ago when I first toured it. I hadn't seen that door when I came down here this morning or the day before either. It made no sense at all. I stepped closer, confused. I wasn't sure where that door came from, but I knew it was definitely the cause of the sounds I had been hearing. There was no other explanation. As I approached the impossible presence before me, I realized something that gave me goosebumps. I recognized the wood, the style, and the deadbolt. It was the attic door. Seeing the attic door was a shock. I didn't want to open it, afraid of what might be lurking behind it. Instead, I ran upstairs and checked if the attic door was still there. The real one, it was still there. Then I ran back down to the basement, only to find that the door there had vanished. Did I just imagine its presence? Thinking I had gone completely mad, I went upstairs and sat on the sofa. My mind raced, trying to comprehend everything, but eventually it surrendered to exhaustion. I dozed off for a while, and then I had another strange dream. This dream was similar to the previous one. I was sitting on the sofa watching TV when I heard scratching sounds. The only difference was that it came from the basement instead of the attic. It also gradually increased and turned into intense knocking on the door that I couldn't ignore. So I got up from the sofa and went down to the basement to stop it. In the dream, the basement was empty, with no mysterious door, and both the knocking and scratching stopped completely when I reached the bottom. Frustrated, I went back upstairs. The sound returned, stronger than before, but this time it came from the attic. I ran up there as fast as I could, but the noise stopped again. I waited. Following the flow of the previous dream, the deadbolt clicked, signaling that the door had unlocked itself. Unlike the previous dream, the door creaked open slightly, and a hand reached out from inside. Right then, I woke up. I had attributed the first dream to an overstressed mind, but it had appeared again. That wasn't normal, at least not for me. Between the door in the basement and the strange nightmares, I was utterly confused. Both confused and scared, I called John. John was a weird guy. He was the type of person who believed in UFOs, ghosts, conspiracy theories, the occult, and things like that. Not only did he believe, but he also researched them. He knew more about Roswell than I knew about myself. As a skeptic, I always thought the huge amount of information he crammed into his head was almost useless. I changed my mind after seeing my attic door appear in the basement. If anyone could help or at least point me in the right direction, it was him. I talked to John for a couple of hours. He was so excited. After hearing about my experience, he started rattling off different things he thought this could be. Some of his theories included wormholes, portals to the afterlife, and even a glitch. One of the many theories he believed was that the world we live in is a simulation. He said he couldn't be entirely sure what it was without seeing it firsthand. Unfortunately, he lived too far away to drop by. Instead of leaving me to my own devices, John gave me some advice on what to do next. After I told him about the voice I caught and the dreams I had, he started leaning towards the ghost idea. He thought something was trying to communicate with me, so he told me I should put the voice recorder in the basement and ask the ghost a few questions. I could listen back to the recording later and listen for the voice. John said I should do the same in the attic too. Although hesitant about his method, I said I would give it a try. After all, I couldn't just sit around and wait for the situation to resolve itself. I didn't like the idea of going into the attic alone, but I needed to do something. After hanging up, I immediately put his plan into action. The basement had to be first, as I was still wary of going upstairs. I set up the app and placed my phone on the basement floor. I continued to ask questions, leaving enough space between each question for someone or something to answer. I asked normal things like its name, age, and what it wanted. After about 5 minutes of interrogation, I stopped the recording and listened back. I must have heard my voice a million times. I hoped something audible would appear. Disappointingly, I didn't catch anything like that. It seemed the attic would indeed have to be my next destination. I reluctantly climbed the stairs to the attic door. I looked at it for a few seconds, took a deep breath, and unlocked the deadbolt. I opened the door and braced myself. Nothing was there. Aside from the previous owner's belongings, when I first bought the house, I had to do some renovations. The previous owners didn't have proper cable TV, electricity, or plumbing. Moreover, they left all their furniture behind. I had cleared out most of it but left everything in the attic. I didn't need that space, and I didn't want to spend more money to clear the house further. I rummaged through the attic items for a while, curious about what I actually owned. A few interesting things stood out. an old postcard from Paris, a strange-looking dog collar, and a book on witchcraft. My fear intensified as I rummaged. The sloped ceiling, antique items, and large window overlooking the backyard gave the place a certain charm, but I still didn't like the attic. I quickly pressed the record button on the app and placed my phone on the floor. I asked the same questions as before, but without leaving much space between them because I really wanted to get out of there. Before stopping the recording, something occurred to me. Maybe the ghost would answer if I asked it the same question I asked in my sleep. I sniffed and asked, "Where are you?" After asking the last question, I stopped the recording and listened back. It sounded almost identical to the segment I recorded in the basement. There were no answers. That was until the end of the segment. After I asked the final question, I heard the familiar low whisper from behind me, "I'm behind you." After hearing the voice on my phone, I immediately turned around. Nothing was there. Nevertheless, I ran downstairs immediately. That creepy voice reinforced my attic phobia and instilled in me an indescribable fear. I couldn't bear to be alone in that house anymore. I called John again and begged him to help me. I said I would pay him for gas for the 8-hour round trip. At first, he was hesitant, knowing he would have to stay overnight and take the next morning off work. Curiosity finally won. After careful consideration, he agreed to come. I waited for John in my car. As I sat there, I couldn't help but gaze at the house. I started asking myself questions like, is it really haunted? Do ghosts actually exist? And my favorite, has my life come to this? Though those questions were merely speculative and rhetorical, I almost knew the answers already. As I looked towards the house with a sense of disappointment, I noticed something flash in the corner of my eye. It was a shadow standing at the attic window. Oh God, what the hell? What am I going to do? Those were the only reactions that ran through my head after seeing that shadowy figure. After a few seconds of staring, the figure retreated from the window, vanishing completely. I sat and pondered it for a few minutes after it left. In a moment of courage, I chose to go back inside the house and up to the attic. Crazy, I know, but this was my house, and I needed to show that thing that I didn't care about its games, even if I was scared out of my wits. Besides, John would kill me if I didn't pursue that ghost. Feeling confident, yet still trembling, I ventured into the attic. I yanked the door open without hesitation and strode in as if I owned the place. After all, I did. The attic had no ghostly figures, but it did smell faintly of candle wax. Unsure how to proceed, I began to speak in a loud, firm voice. "This isn't your house. I'm tired of your stupid games, ghost. I demand that you leave immediately." I knew this wouldn't work, but it was almost cathartic. I felt much better fighting back. I walked around the attic, pleased with my speech, thinking I had truly conquered my fear. My complacency didn't last more than a few seconds. As soon as I finished speaking, a gust of wind swept through the attic and slammed into me like a bus, almost knocking me over. I knew it was the ghost. I tried to stand my ground, but I was pretty scared. I watched everything around me fly everywhere, forming a whirlwind of memories and souvenirs. I was about to retreat when I realized something hadn't budged an inch, the book on witchcraft I had seen earlier. When I noticed it, the wind stopped abruptly, and everything fell to the floor. I walked towards the book, curious why it remained still. As I approached, it opened by itself. Startled, yet somehow I didn't feel any malice. I was slowly accepting the fact that the ghost was indeed trying to communicate with me. The page it opened to was a full spell in Latin, but from what I could understand, it had something to do with planting. Confused, I turned to the ghost for help. "What do you want me to do?" After I asked that, the attic door slammed shut. I thought for a moment and realized it wanted me to read the spell in the attic. I was still confused, but somehow calm. It felt as if I was helping the ghost in some way. Before I could read from the book, my phone rang. It was a text message from John. "Sorry, so sorry, I can't make it. My boss won't give me tomorrow off, and I'm not sure my car can make the round trip. It needs new tires urgently, and I can't get them until Friday. Call me back then and I'll see. Good luck, dude." Though I wasn't panicked anymore, knowing someone was on their way to my house was reassuring, in case things took a turn for the worse. I didn't like it much, but I was alone. I accepted this and turned my attention back to the book. It was time to read the spell. I sniffed and began to read the passage in the book. I had studied Latin in college, and though I didn't remember all the information, I knew enough to pronounce it correctly. Still, I stumbled in a few places, so I had to start over several times. I wanted to get it right, especially if it was truly what the ghost wanted. After completing the spell perfectly, for the most part, the attic door opened. I stepped out with the book in hand, wondering if it was all over. When I reached the bottom step and turned the corner, it clearly wasn't. The basement door was wide open. I was in uncharted territory, taking orders from a ghost, but I hoped I was doing the right thing. Seeing the basement door ajar made me believe that perhaps I needed to read the spell down there too. I still wasn't sure why, but it felt like the ghost's will. So I obeyed. I walked down into the basement with the book and turned on the light. A quick scan showed I was alone and there was no door. I sniffed once more and began to read the spell, word for word. To be honest, I was a little excited. It felt like I was actually doing something effective about my ghost problem, and it might actually help the ghost find peace. This time, I got it right from the start. After finishing the spell in the basement, the house began to shake. When I say house, I mean the entire house, including the basement. I had never experienced an earthquake, but this seemed to be the only plausible explanation for what was happening. It wasn't until I looked around the room in the chaos that I realized it was because of the spell. There, on the far wall, shaking with the rest of the house, was the attic door. I wondered if the spell had somehow summoned it while simultaneously making the house shake. The tremors finally stopped, and I was left with the door, proof of my hypothesis. I waited a few minutes, thinking the door would open, but it didn't. It seemed I would have to do it myself. I wasn't thrilled, but I had come this far, there was no turning back now. I gathered my courage and walked to the door. I yanked it open, no longer afraid, just like I had done upstairs. Behind the door was a surprise. It was the attic. The attic upstairs, everything was exactly the same, except there was a man standing by the window. Hearing me open the door, he turned around, his eyes widening when he saw me. He ran towards me so fast that I didn't even have time to take more than one step back. He dashed through the doorway and out of the basement. He turned back and slammed the attic door shut, making sure to lock the deadbolt. He turned to me, grabbed my shoulders, and looked me straight in the eyes. I was utterly astonished and scared to death. "Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you so much." After expressing his gratitude, the man released me and ran upstairs, but not without turning back and giving me some advice. "Whatever you do, don't go in there." He pointed towards the attic door before speeding upstairs. I ran after him, wanting to ask a few questions, but by the time I reached the main floor, it was too late. My front door was wide open, and I could see him running down the dirt road towards town. And that was it. I've slept every night since then, with no more strange noises or supernatural problems. I even set up cameras and recorders a few times to be sure. They caught nothing at all. I don't know what the hell happened, but I'm certain of one thing. The man who stepped out from behind the attic door was not a ghost. He was a living, breathing human being. Ladies and gentlemen, this is one of the strangest stories our show has ever received. A door appearing in the basement, a door that led to itself, or rather to its past. That man, how long had he been trapped there? While time outside flowed normally, had he been living in some kind of time-space loop? And what would happen if the writer of this letter, the one who freed him, were to return to that house? Perhaps that's why the man's final advice was so important. Whatever you do, don't go in there. Because who knows, next time there might be no one outside to read the spell to free you. That's our first story for tonight. If you're living in an old house, if you hear strange noises at night, be careful. Don't let curiosity lead you to places from which you cannot return. We'll be back shortly with our next story. Don't go anywhere. Or rather, don't open doors that you don't know where they lead. This is Jeff, and this is Midnight Horror Stories. Welcome back to Midnight Horror Stories. I'm Jeff. Do you remember the last story? About the basement door that led to the attic, about the man trapped in some space between time and space. Today, I received an email. An email I had to read 3 times before I could believe it. The sender claimed to be the grandson of the woman who owned that house, the house from last night's story. And what he told you, you won't believe. Sometimes a story has more than one perspective. Sometimes the truth lies on the other side of the door. Listen carefully. Dear show, I don't know where to start. I just heard the story about the house on your show. The house with the strange door. I need to tell you. I know that house. I know that man. And I know what happened. Let me tell you from the beginning. Shut up, you two in the back, I yelled while driving down the road that was once familiar but now no longer was. My best friend and his girlfriend kept giggling like young couples do. I almost regretted inviting them, but I really didn't want to go alone. and inviting one of them meant inviting the whole couple. They were an inseparable combo. Fortunately, the torturous giggling was about to stop because we were almost there. "Here we are," I said, not to point out our arrival but to tell the other two to shut up. I just wanted some quiet to think clearly. I wasn't mentally prepared for what I needed to do. My aunt's old house was just as I remembered it. An old cottage at the end of a cul-de-sac in the middle of nowhere, complete with trees, wild animals, and the welcoming scent of roses that Aunt used to grow near the stone pathway. It was then that it hit me. While walking on that very pathway, smelling those very roses, I stopped dead in my tracks, tears welling up. "Are you okay?" my friend's girlfriend asked. "I'm fine, just give me a moment." They looked worried but understood. What more could I expect when I was returning to Aunt's house right after she passed away? To be honest, it felt a little strange. I might have been Aunt's most beloved nephew, but after she left everything to me in her will, it felt wrong to come here so soon. The funeral was just yesterday. I knew she didn't have much, and I knew I wasn't really here to claim an inheritance, but I still felt bad, and right now I felt even worse. Memories of her flooded back with every step I took towards the front door. I hadn't seen her since I was 10, but I could replay every memory in my head like a movie. I was very close to her back then. She was almost like a mother to me. My birth mother cared about me, but she didn't love me the way Aunt did. I remember visiting her after school and being greeted with classic milk and cookies. Instead of watching TV like a normal kid, she didn't have a TV, I would listen to Aunt play the piano for hours. Sometimes we would go bird watching or gardening, things I haven't done or even thought about doing since. These are my most precious memories. And like treasure, I kept them locked away and hidden for years, until now. As I approached the cottage door, I stopped again. "Seriously, are you okay?" This time it was my friend asking, looking very worried. He had never seen me like this. "I'm fine, why don't you two go for a walk on the trail like you planned? I'll go inside and look around, meet you back at the car later, okay?" "If you say so," they said, and headed down the forest trail, leaving me alone to gaze at the house I hadn't seen in so many years. A strange feeling overwhelmed me, hard to describe, not just grief, not just sadness. I think the best way to put it is, I missed her. It's funny, if she could see me now, she probably wouldn't recognize me. I'm tall, bearded, and wear glasses, almost the complete opposite of how I looked as a child. Thinking about this only made me sadder. She would never get to see the man I had become. With a final, emotional sigh, I continued and reached for the front doorknob. My aunt didn't have locks on her doors or windows. The house was built so long ago that it wasn't even equipped with them. She could have installed them, but she didn't feel the need in the middle of nowhere. She mentioned it one of the first times I stayed here, saying, "Trust the world and it will set you free." As a child, hearing her say this somehow made me feel safe. Now, as an adult, recalling that phrase, I found it very peculiar. But that was my aunt, not artificial and indifferent to the rest of the world around her. To be honest, that's what I missed most about her. All these memories came flooding back to me in fragments as I pulled the door open. The bittersweet agony was interrupted as I saw inside the cottage. Everything, and I mean everything, was still in its exact place. It was as if I was a child again, visiting after school to enjoy Aunt's company. My memories played out right before me like a surge of nostalgic energy. I could see Aunt sitting at the piano, playing as she always did. I could see myself sitting there, eating cookies she made herself, listening intently to the music. I could see her cooking dinner in the kitchen while I sat on the sofa, reading one of her old books. I walked through these vivid recollections and went upstairs to see more. I stopped quickly when I reached the top of the stairs. I realized it only led to the attic. I wasn't interested in that. Remembering that Aunt used it for storage, I turned back downstairs. I didn't know what I was looking for exactly. Perhaps just some reassurance to ease the heaviness in my heart. Perhaps just something to tell me, without a doubt, that Aunt had passed peacefully. The truth is, I felt a terrible sense of guilt being in that house again. Almost too much to bear. As I nearly reached the bottom of the stairs and returned to the living room, I noticed something. I had been in such a rush earlier that I hadn't noticed it when fleeing my tangible memories. It was her desk. The desk where Aunt sat and wrote for hours. She said it helped her experience the world outside the cottage by writing about what she imagined and wished it to be. The more I remembered Aunt, the clearer it became how isolated and somewhat eccentric she was. She was peculiar, but I loved her just the same, even now. What I hadn't noticed when I entered the house was that the desk drawer was open. I looked inside and found a piece of paper in Aunt's handwriting. It read, "To my dearest grandson, asterisk. If you are reading these lines, then the cold current of death has swept your aunt away. I know we haven't seen each other since you were a child, but I hope you still remember our time together fondly. I was happy to care for you, and I know you were happy to be with me. I don't want you to be sad or upset about my death in any way. This is how it is, as it was meant to be. I will always keep you in my heart, and I hope you do the same for me. I want you to live freely despite this and enjoy every moment of life as I did mine. I will see you again one day, and I look forward to it. Trust the world, and it will set you free." I shed a tear as I read the passage, knowing that Aunt wanted me to find peace in this old house. The closure I was seeking had been in her desk drawer all along. The joy I felt almost made me forget the note at the bottom of the page. P.S. Don't go into the basement. Strange, what was down there? Was Aunt hiding something? If so, what? Curious as ever, I walked to the basement door with the letter in hand, knowing the answer was down there. I looked back at the warning one last time. Don't go into the basement. It was probably just the ramblings of an unstable woman on the verge of death. But what was the real meaning behind it? Why the basement? Why me? I could recall the basement from my childhood, but not much. I only went down there once. Aunt was gardening outside while I was inside reading one of her books. I grew tired of reading and put the book down on her desk. Soon after, I started wandering around the house out of boredom. I walked around the cottage quite quickly. Eventually, I came to the basement, a place I had never played in before. Knowing Aunt wouldn't be inside for a while, I decided to venture down. I turned the knob and pushed the door open. I could only see the top of the stairs descending into darkness. Despite a slight fear gripping my chest, I continued. Once down there, my vision was nothing but black. This prompted me to fumble for a light switch. After a few moments, I bumped into a pull cord hanging from the ceiling in the middle of the room. When I pulled it, the room lit up, albeit dimly. What I saw disappointed me. It was a typical, though smaller, basement with concrete walls, a concrete floor, and a few pieces of wood lying in the corner. Probably old floorboards left over from when the house was built. As a child, a bit of mystery and adventure was infused into everything you did. This adventure ended blandly, leading me to an unused space, lost in the depths of the house. The next thing I remembered was Aunt's voice as she came down the stairs, yelling, "You shouldn't be down here." She sounded more worried than angry, perhaps afraid I would somehow get hurt down there. There are more details to this memory, but that's all I could recall standing before the basement door. I turned the knob and pushed the door open, revealing only the top of the stairs and the unlit basement below. Instead of feeling adventurous like I did as a child, I now felt anxious, replaying Aunt's words in my head and once again asking myself why. I slowly walked down the stairs, telling myself it was to avoid shaking the house. But I guess my slow pace was mostly due to my fear of what I might find when I reached the bottom. Impatient and uncomfortably anxious, I sped up a bit. I felt the concrete beneath my feet, and I quickly rushed towards the center of the room, reaching for the light, praying it still worked. I fumbled for the pull cord and yanked it. Relieved it still had power, the room lit up dimly. In a state of panic, I spun around, looking everywhere. What I saw surprised me. Nothing was there. It was just as I had left it as a child. Even the old floorboards were still there, untouched. I felt relieved but more confused than before. Why didn't Aunt want me down there? I thought for a moment and considered that perhaps there was asbestos or mold in the basement walls. This would explain why she didn't want me playing there as a child and why she didn't want me there as an adult. She just wanted to keep me safe, as she always did. This made me feel better, but deep down, I knew there was more to Aunt's plea. As I walked towards the stairs, something stopped me in my tracks. Memories were returning to me. I could recall being in the basement as a child, but there was something different. Different from how it looked now. There was a door that led straight to the attic. How could I have forgotten? Everything was clear to me now. I remembered finding a door down there and stepping into the attic. I knew it was the attic because I looked out the window and saw Aunt gardening 2 floors below. I waved at her, but she was too busy to notice me. I found it strange at the time that I could move directly from the basement to the attic without climbing a single stair. But I dismissed it. After all, I was only 10, and I wasn't interested in getting caught up in the technicalities of how a house was built. As an older person, this strange memory was puzzling. How could the basement lead to the attic? It wasn't even remotely possible. I tried to summon more memories, but the details of that day remained hazy. I tried to convince myself that it was a dream I was remembering. What else could it be? It was nonsense, right? There was no way it could have actually happened. Somewhat comforted by this hypothesis, I continued to the stairs but didn't forget to scan the basement one last time. What I saw erased all doubt from my mind. There, in the middle of the far left wall of the basement, was the door from my memory. I squinted and rubbed my eyes, closing them for a few seconds before opening them again. When I opened them, the door was still there, tangible and present as ever. Impossible. It simply couldn't be. I knew for sure that the door wasn't there moments ago, and I had convinced myself that my childhood memory was just a strange dream. What the hell was going on? There was only one way to find out. After regaining my composure and mustering a bit of courage, I walked, very slowly, towards the inexplicable door. My slow movements reflected my hesitant demeanor, allowing me to delay for a moment while I gathered enough courage to actually open the damn door. Despite my slow movement, I covered the distance in a few seconds, a testament to the basement's small size. The moment of truth had arrived. I took a deep breath, turned the knob, and pushed the door open. This was it. I would finally get to the bottom of Aunt's plea and my own strange memories. The door creaked and revealed the room beyond. Oh my God, it was nothing else but the attic, just as I remembered, window and all. But how? Sunlight streamed through the window and danced brightly across the room, filling me with awe. I stepped forward to look outside, to be sure this was indeed the attic and that I wasn't completely insane. After looking out the window, the verdict was still unclear. 2 floors below was Aunt's backyard, the grass as green as ever and the sky clear. Everything was so vivid. I looked towards Aunt's garden and to my surprise, someone was there. It was a woman and she was gardening. Who was it, and why was she in my aunt's garden? She turned around, revealing her face, and I was shocked. It was my aunt. How could Aunt be here? My aunt had passed away. I saw her being lowered into the ground. Just then, I heard footsteps from behind. Startled, I turned to face the sound. "Who are you?" a soft voice asked. It was me at age 10, standing just 20 feet away. I was in such a state of bewilderment that I decided to accept it and talk to myself. "I'm a friend," was all I could think to say. "Are you Aunt's friend?" the boy asked innocently. I had forgotten how curious I was as a child. "Yes, a very good friend." My younger self stepped forward and looked out the window where I had been standing. I moved aside and let him. He saw Aunt outside gardening below and waved. She didn't notice. "Do you have an aunt?" he asked. "Yes," I said, "but she passed away." "I'm sorry to hear that," he replied. Just then, a flash of insight struck me. Perhaps this was why I was here. Perhaps this was the closure I had needed all along. "Listen to me," I said. "I know it's hard for you to understand now, but one day your aunt will also pass away. I want you to spend as much time as possible with her and visit whenever you can. You mean the world to her, and you'll regret not making the effort to be with her now while you still can." "Yes, sir," was all he said. It was all he needed to say. After wandering around and looking at some old things in the attic, including a few old books that caught his eye, my younger self left the attic to return to the basement and closed the door behind him. I looked out the window and noticed Aunt had finished gardening and was walking towards the house. This was when the next flash of insight struck me. I began to remember more about the events of that day. Everything was coming back to me. I remembered myself as I looked now, standing in the attic, the friendly bearded man wearing glasses. I remembered the conversation we had and even discussing it with Aunt later. My amazement was interrupted by footsteps in the next room. This time, it was Aunt's footsteps. I ran to the door and listened. "You shouldn't be down here," she yelled in a worried voice. I wanted to open the door and confront her, just to see her one last time and tell her I was sorry for never visiting. I reached for the doorknob but thought better of it. She would probably think I was an intruder lurking around her house. As I said, she wouldn't recognize me as an adult. My apology would have to go unspoken. I could hear her scolding my younger self and then taking me upstairs. Instead of listening to find out what happened next, I just remembered. I could recall telling Aunt about the attic door in the basement and the friendly bearded man. She told me I had a vivid imagination and told me to wash my hands for dinner. Looking back now, I remembered a flicker of worry in her eyes, especially after I revealed what the bearded man had told me. She seemed to know more about my experience than she let on. I stood there for a while, taking everything in. Finally, I decided it was time to leave. I grasped the doorknob and yanked it. It wouldn't budge. I twisted it a little harder, but to no avail. A wave of terror consumed me. This made no sense. The doors in Aunt's house didn't have locks, yet nothing had made sense up to this point. I backed up a bit and ran into the door. It still wouldn't budge. I did this a few more times and even tried to break the window. Nothing happened. Feeling exhausted, I sat down and gasped for breath. This was when I heard distant footsteps and voices echoing from inside the house. It was my friend and his girlfriend. I had almost forgotten about them. I was saved. In a state of relief, I called out to them. Clearly, they couldn't hear me from wherever I was. I heard them moving around, calling my name. I raised my voice and started pounding on the door. "I'm here, guys," I yelled, not knowing if I was below or above them. They still couldn't hear me. I started to panic. I began screaming at the top of my lungs and pounding on the attic door as hard as I could. I got no response. With a hoarse voice and aching hands, I gave up. I leaned against the wall and slid down to a sitting position. A few tears streamed down my face. I just sat there and listened to my friend and his girlfriend talking from inside the house. "Where could he be?" she asked. "He said he'd meet us at the car, right? If he's not in the house, where is he?" My friend asked his girlfriend. "Did you try the basement?" she asked. "Yeah, there's just some old floorboards down there." "What about the attic?" she asked. "I tried that too, it's just full of dusty antiques." "We'll have to call the police and have them search for him. He probably got lost in the woods looking for us." As they left the cottage, my heart sank. If they had already searched both the basement and the attic, then where was I? I quietly cried in the corner for a while before rummaging through some of Aunt's old belongings. That was all I could do at this point. I didn't care about anything in there, except for one of her treasures that caught my eye. It was a book with a hand-drawn blood-red symbol on the front. I had never seen anything like it before. I opened it and read the dedication aloud. The spells in this book must be followed exactly. If even one step is not performed correctly, you could endanger yourself and those around you. Use these spells at your own risk. The strange nature of the foreword filled my nerves with anxiety. Aunt, was she a witch? Before turning the page, I noticed an old ginseng bookmark marking one of the pages. I opened to it and saw the title, Garden. I glanced at the next page and saw a spell whose purpose was to bring life to the garden. The ritual involved lighting candles and creating a circle with a special type of sand I had never heard of. From within the circle, you had to read the spell word for word. My Latin was a bit rusty, but from what I could decipher in the incantation, it said something like, "Bring above what is below," which I assumed referred to planting. I deduced that Aunt had performed the ritual in the attic because there were several burnt-out candles among her belongings. Having this book in Aunt's collection now made sense to me. She wanted to add excitement to her dull garden with a little witchcraft. I can say with some confidence that it most likely backfired. I am now stuck in this damn place, a place that seems to be a realm of its own. I will most likely spend eternity here. I am now slowly coming to terms with my fate. After all, she had warned me. I should have listened. This is my fault and mine alone. With countless papers and writing implements here in this old attic, all I have left is to chronicle what has happened to me in the hope that somehow, someone might find it the words of a living ghost. If you are reading these lines, please listen to what I have to say. Your time here is not infinite, and at any moment the terrible hand of the unknown could knock on the door, there to snatch away your loved ones and steal you from a normal, happy existence. The cause of this sudden upheaval will be death, or in my case, something far worse. Last but not least, if you are ever near this area and feel the need to drop by and say hello, feel free. I cannot promise you will receive a response. I just want you to remember two things. Your life is fleeting, so spend your time more wisely than I did mine. And whatever you do, don't go into the basement. Ladies and gentlemen, now we understand. The man in the previous story, he wasn't a random victim. He was the grandson, the child who was warned, the one who received advice from his future self. And now, he's out there somewhere free. Thanks to the first letter writer who read that spell without knowing who he was freeing. But what about the house? Is the door still there? Is the attic in the basement still waiting for someone to go down? I don't know, and I'm not sure I want to know. This is a reminder, my friends. Sometimes, warnings are left not to pique our curiosity. They are left to save our lives. Don't go into the basement, don't open that door, don't look back. These words are not meant to test us. They are the final pleas from those who lost too much by not listening. Tonight, if you hear something from the basement, if you see a door where there shouldn't be one, please remember this story. There are places we should not go, doors that should not be opened, and secrets best left undisturbed. We'll be back shortly. This is Jeff, and this is Midnight Horror Stories. It's almost midnight, the hour of late-night cries, the hour of tired mothers and sleepless fathers, the hour of infants needing comfort, but sometimes silence is far more frightening. This is Jeff, and you're listening to Midnight Horror Stories. Tonight, I have a special phone call. The caller didn't say much. He just said, "Please read this. Everyone needs to know I'm not crazy." Then he left an email address. When I opened that email, I had to read it 3 times. Not because it was hard to understand, but because it was too painful to believe. This is a story about love, about loss, and about the thin line between reality and what we desperately want to believe is true. Be warned, this story might make you question what you see every day. Listen closely. Dear show, something is very wrong with my baby. He's only 4 months old, but I can already feel he's not himself anymore. He used to laugh every time I made a funny face, but now he just stares at me. He looks at me with an empty, yet strange, expression. He used to cry at night like a normal baby, but now he just lies there staring up at the ceiling from his crib. It's really bizarre. I'm not even sure he sleeps anymore. Every time I wake up in the middle of the night to check on him, he's just lying there with the same expression on his face, staring into nothing. He stares into nothing until I walk into the room. Then he turns his attention to me. I don't like it. I really don't. I decided to take the baby to the doctor's office shortly after this strange series of events began. As unsettling as the situation seemed, I was more worried than scared. After all, he's my only child, and as a single father, there's not much else to do besides worry. Sometimes I wish I had someone to share this burden with, but for now, it's just me and him. When we arrived at the clinic, I noticed others in the waiting room. A mother, her son, and their service dog. I'm pretty sure the mother was deaf. The boy looked about 3 years old. He looked over at us and smiled, but his delight was suddenly replaced by a look of terror. He lunged to hug his mother's leg and hid behind her. At this point, the dog looked over at us and began barking frantically. Strangely, the mother managed to calm both her son and the dog, and all 3 were called in to see Dr. Harrison. Eventually, they left, leaving just my baby and me. We continued to wait while Dr. Harrison prepared for our appointment. The time passed, probably only a few minutes, but it felt much longer. I could see the baby staring at me from the corner of my eye. I could feel his eyes piercing through me, even though I tried not to look back. Inexplicably, a strange feeling of anxiety began to grow within me. Fortunately, Dr. Harrison came out and rescued me from my private torment. It sounds terrible, but I couldn't bear to be alone with my baby anymore. I spoke with Dr. Harrison and explained everything that was happening, careful not to tell him what had just occurred in the waiting room. I didn't want him to think I was crazy. He performed the usual tests on my baby and told me that he was a perfectly normal and healthy baby. He even said, I was lucky that he was so quiet at this age. Lucky, really? I couldn't comprehend this. No, I wasn't lucky. And no, my baby wasn't normal. Normal babies don't act this way. They can't. I could have ignored the situation and put it down to a strange phase he was going through. A phase that would hopefully pass in the coming months. But not only did it not pass, it got worse, much worse. I put the baby in his crib a few nights ago and tried to ignore the blank stare he cast my way. I turned off the lights and went to bed. This was my normal routine. At about 3:00 a.m., I woke up. I don't know why I woke up at such a strange hour. I usually sleep through the night, sleeping like a baby, for lack of a less ironic phrase. However, I was glad I woke up when I did because of what I discovered when I did. Well, glad in a sense. There, crawling on all 4s, crawling across my bed, was none other than my baby. How could that be? I quickly looked over at the crib. It was just as I had left it. There was no way he could have crawled out of it at this age. Surely he would have fallen to the floor with a loud thud and gotten hurt. So how did he get from his crib to my bed? How did I put him back in his crib and try to go back to sleep? I found that task almost impossible because I couldn't get the image of him out of my head. As he was crawling on my bed, he was crawling towards me. Not only that, he still had that blank expression on his face, staring at me as he crawled, his eyes unblinking. He didn't blink, not even once. Why was he crawling towards me? What would he do when he finally reached me? The questions filled my frightened brain, too many to simply go back to sleep. I stayed awake for the rest of the night, spending most of it staring at his crib. Eventually, exhaustion caught up with me. As soon as the sun rose above the horizon, I passed out. It must have been an hour before I woke up. After rubbing my eyes a few times and looking over at the crib, I realized something. My baby wasn't in it. I jumped up and investigated. I threw back the blankets only to find it truly empty. He was gone. I looked over at the bed, but he wasn't there either. I turned the apartment upside down looking for him. I checked every room, every small nook and cranny I could find. While doing this, there was a fair amount of pain in my stomach. I couldn't tell if I was worried for his safety or simply terrified, perhaps both. I finished ransacking the apartment and returned to my room to catch my breath. What I saw almost took my breath away again. There, lying in his crib, was my baby, calm as usual. I walked to the crib and just stared at him. Of course, he stared back with that unsettling expression. At this point, I realized I was genuinely afraid of a baby. I looked at him for a few more moments before speaking. "What are you?" His eyes widened when he heard me speak. I couldn't be sure, but I thought that perhaps, just for a fleeting moment, my baby might have smiled at me. It's been almost a week since he somehow crawled onto my bed. Since then, I've placed a recording camera in the room just to see what it might capture. The camera made me feel safer than before. I know it sounds illogical, but I think its very presence was preventing him from doing anything else. Anyway, at least I was getting some sleep at night when it was there. The camera was pretty good quality. It had night vision, HD recording, everything I needed to monitor his actions at night. If he so much as moved a limb, I would see and hear it. I finally had a way to combat the anxiety. But setting up this expensive equipment made me feel silly. Monitoring your child is one thing to ensure his safety, but I was actually spying on him to see if he was up to something. Crazy, I know, but what happened next confirmed my suspicions, even if only to a small degree. Until last night, the footage was completely normal. He slept through the night while I tossed and turned. I thought maybe he was feigning sleep because of the camera. However, the second night of recording was a little strange. The first few hours were normal, just like the night before, but that's when he did something surprising. Using his small, undeveloped arms and legs, he stood up in his crib, using the rails for support. He adjusted himself to face the camera and stared at it. He stared for 12.5 minutes with that unsettling blank expression before lying down. The part that truly shocked me was about halfway through the clip when he actually let go of the rails and stood upright on his own for a few moments. This, to me, was utterly inexplicable. I was stunned. Countless theories assaulted my mind at an alarming rate, from the mundane to the sinister. Perhaps he was simply developing beyond his age, capable not only of standing upright but also of escaping his crib and crawling onto my bed as he had done nearly a week prior. I quickly dismissed this thought, deeming it almost impossible. Perhaps he wasn't my child, perhaps he was something else entirely. Not him, but an asterisk. I also dismissed this theory, unwilling to surrender myself to any notion of the supernatural. It didn't make sense. I knew I would have to speak with Dr. Harrison again to gain some peace of mind. I had already scheduled another appointment with Dr. Harrison for the end of the week, but after watching this footage, I asked him to fit me in sooner. I arrived at his office once again with my baby and patiently sat in the waiting room. I didn't notice his blank stare as much as before, but it still unsettled me. As we waited, his stare became harder and harder to ignore. For some reason, I felt compelled to look back, even though I knew doing so would make me anxious. Nevertheless, I turned my head down and stared back at him. There was something wrong with his eyes. I couldn't quite pinpoint it, but there was something very wrong about them. They were still those eyes, yet they seemed different. I don't know how to explain it. Fortunately, Dr. Harrison came out, ending our tense staring contest. What a relief. I don't know why, but I felt like I would have just kept staring at him, seemingly without end. Instead of indulging in my internal fearful tendencies, I focused on the task at hand. Skipping the seemingly normal parts of the video, I showed Dr. Harrison the strange incident from the second night. He watched in amazement as my 4-month-old stood up on his own and turned towards the camera. Impatient, I asked for his opinion. Do you know what he said? He actually congratulated me on having such a well-developed child. He said my baby was advanced for his age, and he was glad he could help him in the process, as if he had anything to do with it. Telling him about the night the baby crawled onto my bed also yielded no results. It just added to his already inflated ego. I was utterly stunned by his reaction. Anyway, I did manage to get the receptionist to refer me to a baby behavior specialist on my way out. I desperately needed someone to talk to who wasn't completely oblivious to the problem. I went home, both angry at Dr. Harrison and exhausted by this whole ordeal, both mentally and physically. I put the baby in his crib, careful not to look into his eyes again, even though I felt compelled to. Then I went to the living room and sat on the sofa to relax. I closed my eyes for a moment and quickly drifted off to sleep. I dreamed. In the dream, I was sitting on the sofa, just as I had been before falling asleep. I tried to get up, but my limbs felt very heavy and sluggish. I gave up and just sat there. I looked around and noticed the room looked a little different. The picture frames I had hung on the wall, containing photos of my wife and baby, were all empty now. At this point, I started to feel dizzy as an uncomfortable pain arose in my stomach. I felt compelled to look to my left, towards the bedroom. There, standing alone, was my baby. He was standing in the doorway of the bedroom, just staring at me. Before I could even react in my dream, he began to walk. In a strange, awkward gait, my baby walked towards me. His gait was distorted and unnatural, increasing the pain in my stomach. He continued to walk until he finally reached a point just inches from where I sat. He reached out to me as I watched in horror. What was he going to do? Why was this happening? Why? I woke up before his hand touched me. I jumped up in fear, still half asleep, and ran into the bedroom. I rushed to the crib, and a wave of relief washed over me. He was still in it, staring up at me blankly, as he always did. Thank God. I walked towards the sofa and sat down to gather my thoughts. It seemed even in my sleep I wasn't safe. The predicament I found myself in was not only causing me a great deal of stress, but also giving me nightmares. I needed it to end. I would call the specialist immediately. In the meantime, it was back to square one, trying to get some sleep while recording his actions in the hope of finding some answers. This, it seemed, was what our little family had become. We now lay at the intersection of strange and utterly insane. Personally, I just wanted it all to end so I could finally get some good sleep. I had called Mrs. DeWitt, the specialist, and we had an appointment set for next week. I would be excited about this if the situation hadn't escalated last night. It seemed his behavior had taken another turn for the worse. Unfortunately, I seemed to be the sole target for his late-night antics. Many times throughout this, even now, I've asked a simple question that I've never gotten a clear answer to. Why me? While on the subject of questions, another has been haunting me lately. Why does he act that way? I really needed to know why. Then there were the dreams. What did they mean? I could understand if there was only one. But that wasn't the case. It seemed every time I closed my eyes, a new reel began to play. And with each reel, my baby played the villain. Each story was structured differently, but the plot remained the same. I was always frozen and unable to move while he found new and unique ways to terrify me before finally reaching wherever I was. Then I would wake up, drenched in a cold sweat, just as terrified as I was in my sleep. I suppose it didn't matter how each story was woven. I always ended up in his toxic web. Still, these nightmares might just be the product of an over-anxious imagination. They were probably meaningless. At least that's what I told myself to feel better about them. But that didn't necessarily mean they weren't meaningless. Besides, the fear I felt in my dreams was nothing compared to what I felt when awake, like the feeling I had last night, for instance. Instead of explaining the events as they unfolded, I'll start by describing them through the footage, if only for clarity. You'll understand what I mean when we begin. At a certain point, the footage was almost identical to the video I recorded the other night. He stood up on his own and turned towards the camera. What followed was what I now believe to be perhaps an anxious and malevolent stare. This is when things got a little strange, or should I say, stranger. After a few moments of him staring, the camera seemed to fall off the shelf where I had placed it, lens down onto the floor. That's when I woke up. Before continuing, I want to share a few thoughts on what might have happened. It's true the camera could have simply fallen off the shelf, but I swear I had placed it in a secure position. It might also be important to note that nothing else on the shelf fell, so whatever caused the untimely fall of the camera didn't disrupt anything else. I personally believe he somehow caused the camera to fall by staring at it. I know how it sounds, but it's not far-fetched considering everything else that's been going on. I truly wasn't sure one way or another. For now, we'll return to the events at hand. From this point forward, I'll explain the events from my perspective, if only to get a clearer picture than the fallen camera could provide. I woke up to the loud noise and jumped up immediately. I worried it might have been the baby falling out of his crib. On closer inspection, I noticed he was once again gone. After tossing the blankets in the crib looking for him, I heard the familiar sound of a baby crying. I abruptly stopped searching and stood frozen in astonishment. He hadn't displayed a single emotion since his strange behavior began, let alone shed a tear. I was certainly taken aback by this. It took me a moment to process everything before I regained my composure. His crying was coming from the direction of the living room. I ran out there as fast as I could, but the crying stopped almost as abruptly as it began. I turned on the light, but he was nowhere to be found. The crying started again a few moments later, but this time it was coming from the kitchen, around the corner. I ran out there, only for the crying to stop again and to find him gone there too. What the hell was going on? I sat down on the kitchen floor and tried to calm myself. I hadn't noticed it before, but I was trembling uncontrollably with adrenaline. Why was this happening? How could any of this be? I asked myself these questions but didn't know the answers, nor how to find them. I couldn't even find my baby. It seemed my nightmares were bleeding into real life, and there wasn't a single thing I could do to stop it. I continued to sit on the floor, unable to stop shaking. This was when the crying started again. This time it was coming from the bedroom, where this late-night impromptu adventure began. As I ran from the kitchen to the bedroom, my heart pounded in my chest. I was scared. I didn't know what I would find when I entered the bedroom, but whatever it might be terrified me. Still, I had to keep running. I had to see if he was safe, even if he wasn't himself anymore. And so that's exactly what I did. When I entered the room, the crying stopped. I ran to the crib and found him lying there. He was once again staring at me with that creepy expression. I was relieved he was safe but still terrified by what had happened. My breathing became erratic, and a tightening sensation formed in my chest. It was the onset of a panic attack, I think. I needed another moment to collect myself. I walked to the bed and sat down, hoping I wouldn't fall apart. Right then, I had to stay focused and keep this family functioning somehow. The stress and lack of sleep were taking a heavy toll on me. Nevertheless, I tried my best to explain the events of the night logically, which I clearly couldn't. However, while replaying these events in my head, I realized something. I stood up and walked back to the crib where he lay. I hesitantly reached out to him. I carefully touched my finger to his cheek and realized they weren't wet. There were no tears at all. The appointment with Mrs. DeWitt was this morning. I have to say, I felt a little strange. I honestly didn't think I could trust anyone anymore. My baby and I would have to solve this problem ourselves. Clearly, no one could help us. Not Dr. Harrison, not Mrs. DeWitt, not a single human being on this earth. As lonely as it felt to realize this, I somehow felt strong. At the same time, it put everything into perspective and allowed me to take my life into my own hands. No matter how messed up my situation was, deep down I knew I could get through it, at least I hoped I could. Let me explain what happened. After a sleepless night with the baby, I groggily began to prepare for my appointment with Mrs. DeWitt. For some reason, I was very anxious. This was strange because I had no reason to feel that way. I should have been excited, if anything. After all, this could very well be the first step in helping him with whatever was afflicting him. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling. Skipping breakfast due to a loss of appetite from anxiety, I quickly left with the baby. The drive took about 40 minutes as Mrs. DeWitt's office was in the next town. I wish I could say the drive went smoothly, but it didn't. About 15 minutes into the trip, I decided to check on him via the rearview mirror. He had been silent the entire time, but I delayed checking until then, afraid of his unnatural stare. I knew I wouldn't like what I saw when I looked in the mirror, but not to what extent. As I looked in the mirror, I noticed he was gone. His car seat was still there, but empty. My heart sank as I quickly veered into the emergency lane and slammed on the brakes. I stumbled out of the car, rushed, and opened the back door. I searched the entire car for him. I overturned his car seat, pulled everything unsecured out of the car, and practically tore apart the interior looking for him. Despite my best efforts, he was nowhere to be found. I wondered for a moment if I had left him at home. I tried to recall everything I had done that morning, but it was all a blur. I blamed it on lack of sleep. Just before convincing myself that I needed to drive home to see if he was there, I realized I hadn't checked everywhere. I know it sounds a little crazy, but I felt compelled to check the trunk. It was true I hadn't checked there, but of course, there was a reason. How could a baby get from a car seat to the trunk in a moving car? But then again, how could he do anything he had done lately? Perhaps, just perhaps, my baby was in there. In a bewildered state, I reluctantly unlocked and opened the trunk. Sure enough, my baby was there. He was lying on his back just as he lay in his crib and, of course, staring up at me. I should have been shocked he was there, but I was more exasperated. His antics were truly mentally exhausting. They continued to affect me even in the middle of the highway. I wanted it all to stop. I put him back in his car seat and returned to the road, pretending nothing had happened. This was not before checking him for any injuries or bruises. There were none. This didn't surprise me either. Nothing surprised me anymore. I chose to focus on the road and the journey ahead instead of the strangeness that seemed to control my daily life. That was all I could do to avoid becoming completely and irredeemably insane. I arrived at Mrs. Dwit's office a little late due to the highway incident, so I quickly picked up the baby. Thankfully, he was still there and rushed into the building, hoping she would still see us. I hurried to her office door and opened it, revealing two people behind it. Those two people were none other than Dr. Harrison and presumably Mrs. Dwit. They were clearly discussing something before I burst in. "What the hell?" Confused, I almost yelled at them, demanding to know what was going on. Dr. Harrison came over to me, completely ignoring the baby, and placed a hand on my shoulder. He told me that Mrs. Dwit wasn't a baby behavior specialist, she was an adult behavior specialist. In other words, he said she was a psychiatrist. I was stunned. Was this some kind of intervention? Why the secrecy? What exactly were their motives? I asked again, "Why me?" I tried to turn and leave, but Dr. Harrison pleaded with me. He seemed genuinely worried about my well-being. Although I didn't like the idea of talking to a therapist, this was the first time Dr. Harrison had shown any real concern throughout this entire ordeal. I decided it would be in my best interest to humor him, even if just as a courtesy. I had been thinking about seeing a therapist anyway, so what did I really have to lose? Dr. Harrison said he would watch the baby during the therapy session so I could be alone with Mrs. Dwit. He said there could be no distractions or interruptions. I knew I could trust him with the baby, so I handed him over. Dr. Harrison held the baby awkwardly, almost as if he had never held an infant before. This was strange, but I brushed it aside. Soon enough, I was sitting in a chair opposite Mrs. Dwit. It was time to open up, it seemed. Mrs. Dwit was young and attractive. She had long dark hair pulled back in a bun, glasses, a white button-down shirt, and a black skirt that reached her knees. Her demeanor was captivating, and her voice had a certain allure. It was both comforting and pleasant, with just the right amount of sexual appeal to still consider her appearance elegant and stylish. I could see through this game. The way she carried herself was designed to make me more easily spill my guts. As such, it was a ruse to get me to reveal the inner workings, my deepest secrets and thoughts. I decided I wouldn't succumb to her probing ways. We started by talking about normal things. I spoke about work, my home, and the people I associated with. Without noticing, her questions became more and more intrusive. She asked about my childhood, my parents, and significant events in my life. At first, I didn't notice her verbal intrusiveness because she also shared her past with me. With every story or answer I gave her, she would reciprocate with one of her own. We even laughed together about some of these stories. It was great. To be honest, it felt like I was on a first date. She was very easy to talk to, and I had no problem giving her the information she desired. But that's when she went too far. After discussing a few arbitrary college events, Mrs. Dwit seemed to cross a line and asked me about my wife. Like glass suddenly shattering, the immersion was broken. Still like some first dates I had been on, we began to argue, and I mean really argue. It lasted for perhaps an hour. We even yelled at each other. I don't know why, but it felt like I was fighting with a good friend. Sometimes it even felt like I was fighting with my wife. I can say now that Mrs. Dwit was very good at her job and a talented actress. Like many arguments I've had with friends, this one eventually ended calmly and measuredly. We actually made up and apologized to each other. It even felt like we were closer because of it. I guess there was just something about this woman that made it hard to stay angry at her. Anyway, I decided to discuss what had happened with my wife with her. And without even being asked again, I just started talking. Confused and surprised, she sat down at her desk and listened intently. My wife and I had a picture-perfect relationship. I met her in college, and we immediately became best friends. We knew everything about each other and relied on each other for support during tough times. We could always count on the other to be there. It was a wonderful feeling. Just knowing this, we knew we liked each other but never talked about it. On college graduation day, I simply pulled out a ring and proposed to her. She screamed, "Yes!" in my face before tackling me with a tight hug. It was a very spontaneous act on my part. I hadn't planned it either. The idea came to me that very day. Still, I had never been more sure of anything in my entire life. After settling down and putting our college degrees to use, my wife became pregnant with our son. It wasn't planned, but we couldn't have been happier. Personally, I couldn't think of anyone else I would want to have a child with. Everything was going well for us. Until about 9 months later, I won't go into too much detail, but my wife passed away during childbirth. The list of complications that led to her death was very long, so long that it made her death seem inevitable. Since then, I've accepted her passing, putting all my love and affection into our son. Not just for me, but for her too. That's why I'm so desperate in my search for answers. He's all I have left of her. He's all I have left of *us**. Mrs. DeWitt didn't interrupt me once. She turned out to be not only a great listener but also a wonderful friend. I actually felt good after opening up to her. I had never told anyone about my wife before, or at least not to that extent. It was cathartic in a way. But of course, Mrs. DeWitt and I weren't friends, we had just met. This was a business call, a favor to Dr. Harrison. Her subsequent questions reflected this. After hearing my long story, Mrs. DeWitt asked about my baby and what had happened to him. I didn't know what she was talking about. She asked confusing questions about what had happened to him right after he was born. I simply told her I brought him home. She continued to bombard me with questions, but my answer was the same every time. What did this have to do with anything? Seeing that she couldn't get through to me, Mrs. DeWitt took off her glasses and stopped asking. Instead, she decided to tell me a few things. The first thing she said caused a sharp chill to spread throughout my entire body. She told me, "Your baby is dead." Before continuing, she gave me a moment to react, which I certainly did. I yelled at her as I had before, but she didn't yell back. She simply let me vent my own anger, it seemed. I tried to leave, but she insisted I sit down and listen to what she had to say. Whatever fake friendship we might have had ended the moment she told me my baby wasn't alive, but she still had that comforting allure. I decided to listen to her, but that didn't mean I had to believe her. I sat back in the chair and remained silent. I glared at Mrs. DeWitt angrily while she spoke nothing but lies. She told me that due to the same complications that killed my wife, my baby also passed away shortly after birth. In her professional opinion, unable to cope with the loss of both my wife and child, I had suffered a nervous breakdown. The breakdown was so severe that my brain needed a way to repair itself. That's when my baby appeared. Apparently, pretending, as well as hallucinating, that he was still alive was easier for me than accepting the death of both him and his mother. A few unexpected tears rolled down my cheeks as she told me this. I wasn't sure why. Mrs. DeWitt continued by telling me that Dr. Harrison was very worried about all this. He had tried his best to play along, but he couldn't bear to see me like this anymore. It seemed every time I came to his office with my baby, he just pretended the baby was there. He also gave fake reactions when looking at the empty footage of an empty crib. He did this for me, as a friend, knowing I had lost my family. I couldn't listen to anything else she said. It was too much. I tried again to get up and leave, but she pleaded with me to stay. She told me to think about the small things that had happened to me. She said, my brain was desperately trying to tell me he wasn't there. The reason I noticed his eyes looked wrong was because the only time I had ever seen his eyes was in the hospital after he had passed away. He never smiled or cried because only living babies can do these things. The crying I heard that night was just the memory of him crying when he was born, the only time he shed a tear. The disappearing photos in my dream were showing me that both my wife and son were truly gone. Lastly, but not least, was the horrifying nature of it all. According to Mrs. DeWitt, my baby and his antics weren't scaring me. What truly terrified me was accepting his death. I let her finish speaking before standing up and angrily walking past her to the door. She could tell I didn't believe a word, so she tried one last time to reach me. She reminded me of how impossible everything that happened with my baby was. She begged me to let her help. I turned back before opening the door, looked her straight in the eyes, and said one last thing to her. I'm sorry, Mrs. DeWitt, but I will never give up on my son. Ladies and gentlemen, sometimes love can blind us so much that we cannot see the truth. Sometimes the pain is so great that our minds create another reality, a reality in which we can live. This man, he lost everything in one day. His wife, his son, his entire family, and his mind. His brain tried to save him by giving him what he needed most. His son, still alive, still breathing, still there. But a deep part of him knew the truth, and that part was screaming, trying to tell him through dreams, through strange looks, through illogical details. The eyes looked wrong because they were the eyes of a dead child. He didn't cry because only living babies cry. Others reacted strangely. The little boy was scared, the dog barked because they saw nothing. They only saw a man holding air. I don't know what happened to this man afterward. Did he accept the truth? Or is he still there, caring for a child who doesn't exist? This is not a story about ghosts or monsters. This is a story about the price of love, about how grief can transform our reality. If you know someone who has just experienced a great loss, please be there for them, listen to them, help them. Because sometimes our minds can become the most beautiful and dangerous prison we will ever know. This is Jeff, and this is Midnight Horror Stories. If you or someone you know is struggling with mental health, please seek help. You are not alone. We'll be back shortly with our next story. But for now, hold your loved ones close. Cherish every moment because life is short and love can save us or destroy us. It's past midnight, the hour of sleepless scientists, the hour of experiments gone awry, the hour when the line between discovery and disaster becomes most fragile. Hello everyone, this is Jeff, and you're listening to Midnight Horror Stories. Tonight, we have a different kind of story, not about ghosts or haunted houses, but about science, ambition, and the price people pay when they try to cross the boundaries set by nature. I received this email from someone who identified himself as a physicist. He didn't give his real name, didn't say where he worked, only said this was a warning. Don't let curiosity lead you to places you can't return from. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the story of Room 371. Dear show, there exists a room where the laws of physics don't work as they should. I regret ever having a hand in its creation. That room is one of many. Experiments that allowed us to manipulate the fabric of spacetime in an enclosed location, to toy with the delicate laws of the physical world and bend them to our will. The first 370 experiments went without a hitch. Some of our brilliant works included Room 112, where one could experience astral projection with the ability to remotely observe locations. In another room, Room 213, there were dream storms. Any subject sleeping inside would be assailed by fragments from others' nocturnal theaters, both nightmares and pleasant dreams. And our highest achievement until then, Room 301. Within its walls, time stood still. No matter how long a subject claimed to have been inside, they always exited the room at the exact same time they entered. Then came that room, the room that overshadowed all the others. Room 371. The first few trials were promising. Mixed results and readings led us to conclude that this room had somehow inherited characteristics from all the previous ones. First and foremost, time could be warped there to some degree. Subjects reported being inside for weeks when in reality it had only been a few days. Additionally, everyone experienced different things: out-of-body experiences, hallucinations, psychic visions. The list went on. It was shaping up to be our greatest work. But then the unthinkable happened. It was a day I will never forget, no matter how hard I try. Elizabeth, you're 7 months pregnant. You know my work here is dangerous. We can't risk your safety. A sigh of frustration echoed through the phone. I know, Garrett, I know, but I haven't seen you all week. Will you even be there when our son is born? This time I sighed. The work we're doing here, it could very well change the world. When our son is born, I'll be there, and I want him to be proud of his father. We had reached an impasse, and so we sat for a while in silence, phone to ear, each hoping to be understood by the other. It was in this silence that I charted a middle ground. How about this? Why don't you leave Jessica with the babysitter and book a room at the local hotel? I usually sleep here, but the hotel is just around the corner. I can meet you there after work. We'll have a private night. After work? Do you ever finish work? She scoffed. Not particularly, but I promise I'll be there at 9:00 p.m. All right, I'll do it. You're lucky because I'm still madly in love with you after all these years. There was a slight reluctance in her voice, but deep down, I knew she was ecstatic to meet halfway. As attached as I was to my work, I would give anything for just a small chance to make her smile. Good, I'll see you tonight. I gave her directions to the hotel, and we hung up. Then I turned my attention back to room 371, a walled-off box connected to the rest of the lab by arms, controls, and cables. It contained no shortage of mysteries, and I would die if I didn't solve all of them. If only I had known then what I was walking into. Hours passed, and soon the sunlight through the lab window was replaced by moonlight. I wasn't any closer to discovering the inner workings of the room, but it was a process, one that could take months or even years to unravel. That's why I couldn't stop. Any delay in research would push back the revelation, and I wanted answers yesterday. However, the taxing work made my eyes heavy, and my mind drifted into sleep as my head fell onto the desk where I was working. As soon as I lost consciousness, I was transported to a strange and vivid dreamscape. To this day, I can't be sure if this nightmare was a product of exhaustion or the effects of room 371 just a few meters from where I slept. In the dream, I was with my wife at the hotel. She was propped up in bed, legs spread, screaming. I was beside her, holding her hand and trying to calm her through the agony of childbirth. She kept looking at me for comfort after each push. "It's okay, Liz, I'm here, you're doing great." She squeezed my arm harder with each cry of pain. It was pale and bloodless by the final push. Then, finally, our son was born, but something was very wrong. The baby didn't cry. Instead, when I held him in my arms, he smiled. Not a beautiful smile, but a strange one. It curved in unnatural places and stretched too close to his ears. Unsettling was the mildest way to put it. Then there were his eyes, normal at first, but they soon turned black. Those empty voids grew darker with each blink. I had no choice but to put him down to escape that gaze. "Elizabeth, you hold him for a while." I looked down at my wife. She was unconscious. Her chest was still. I placed my hand on her neck. No pulse. "Elizabeth, Elizabeth, wake up." I put the baby down on the bed and tried to shake her. When that failed, I resorted to chest compressions. Nothing seemed to work. "No, no, my dearest Elizabeth, you can't die, you can't." Tears streamed down my face as panic set in. I lunged for the door to call for help, but the doorknob wouldn't budge. That's when I noticed a number affixed to the wood. 371. Room 371. But why? The door burst open, hitting me in the head and knocking me to the floor below. I looked up, my vision blurring, and saw the shadowy figure of a man enter the room. He stepped over my body, picked up my son, and walked out, but not without leaving me a chilling pronouncement. "They are mine now, Garrett." I woke up gasping, jolting from my bed. Confused, I looked over at the clock. 11:15 p.m. "Oh no, Elizabeth." I called the hotel and asked the operator to connect me to her room. I just hoped she wouldn't be too angry about me sleeping through our appointment. "Garrett Harold Covenwood, this isn't how you get into my good books." From her tone, she was angrier than ever. Still, it was wonderful to hear her voice after that terrible nightmare. "I'm sorry, my love." Work got the best of me. I dozed off at my desk. "It won't happen again, I promise." There was a faint voice in the background. "Is that Dad? Can I talk to Dad?" It was our daughter. "You brought Jessica along? I told you to leave her with the babysitter. Doesn't she have school tomorrow?" Her voice was still firm and unyielding. "Your daughter hasn't seen you all week. I gave her the day off to spend time with her father. Get here now and don't waste another minute." Clearly, she was serious, and I wasn't about to test her anger any further. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. I just need to." My eyes swept over the room, and I recalled the strange dream my mind had concocted. "Hey, Elizabeth, what room are you in?" "Room 371. My heart almost stopped. "Are you absolutely sure?" "Yes, what does it matter?" This was bad. The hotel my wife was staying at only had 2 floors. I knew this because I had stayed there many times myself. There couldn't be more than about 100 rooms, certainly not enough to warrant a room numbered 371. "Elizabeth, listen to me, take Jessica and get out of there right now." There was static cutting in after I said this. "Garrett, I can't hear you." "Elizabeth, get out of there now." More static, but I heard a single phrase through the noise, a phrase that sent shivers down my spine. "Garrett, I think my water just broke." We were disconnected. I tried to call the hotel back, but the line was dead. I didn't know what was happening, but with the unforeseen forces at play in room 371, I knew it couldn't be good. With my family in mind, I threw all caution to the wind and walked to the room. The lab had safety protocols to follow before entering, but I didn't care. My working hypothesis was that it was acting as a portal, connecting itself to a room in the nearby hotel and taking its place. Hopefully, I could enter and pull my family out. This had to work. It had asterisk to work. As I entered the room, my theory was proven wrong. It was just as we had left it last time. No one was inside, let alone my wife and daughter. My next action was to run out of the lab and rush towards the hotel. But the room had other plans. The door slammed shut on its own as I approached. I reached for the knob, but it wouldn't turn. Just then, footsteps from behind. "Hello, Garrett." With a surge of adrenaline, I turned to face the source of the voice. What I saw was astonishing. It was me. A living, breathing replica of myself standing right before my eyes. Every feature, every detail, identical. I would never have thought the room could do something like this. Not in a million years. So, what do I look like? After the initial surprise wore off, I regained my focus. "My wife and daughter, what's happening? Is it you?" He scoffed. "Of course it's me. Who else could it be?" I didn't understand what he was implying. "And who are you?" I asked. "Don't you recognize me, Garrett? You've been tinkering with me since I was born, examining every nook and cranny of me, but I've also been observing you. Now, I've learned about you inside and out, taken your form, and I even think you'll be honored." As indirect as the answer was, I could piece the fragments together. "You're the room. You're this asterisk room, room 371. He smiled. "Now you understand." My mind instinctively tried to run the numbers and comprehend how this could be happening, but this wasn't the time for work. "What are you doing with my wife and daughter?" His smile widened. "To know what, you first need to know how, and then why." I didn't have time for his games. Whatever he was, I lunged towards him with outstretched arms, but to no avail. My entire body passed right through him. "Nice try, Garrett. This is just a projection I've planted in your mind. Please, sit down." I've never had anyone to talk to. This is the most fun I've ever had. In fact, ever. I stood leaning against the wall and glared at him, my eyes welling up with tears. "Please let them go, I beg you." He shook his head disapprovingly. "I can't do that, Garrett. That wouldn't be in my best interest. I don't understand what you're talking about." "It's simple, actually. You see, you didn't create me, you found me. I am a cosmic energy source, one that you've tapped into and harnessed with your latest project here." He gestured around the room we were in. "You woke me up and granted me the gift of consciousness. For that, I thank you. But now that I am awake, I am hungry. You humans need air, water, and food to sustain yourselves. I need something else." What do you need?" I asked, losing patience by the second. "Souls. I need to feed on the souls of living beings to exist. And oh my, human souls are worth all the effort it takes to find them." "Effort?" I asked. "Oh yes, you think I'm confined to this prison, but I can travel. It's difficult, but through certain connections I can find prey. The living seconds, the aura you humans share with each other. At first I couldn't reach them, but then you came along and brought them to me close enough to taste." He was talking about my family. "Why not take me? I'm right here. Take me instead of them and leave them alone." He let out a horrible, malicious laugh that pierced me to the core. "I never will, Garrett. Through your aura, I am connected to them. I can project this room and my form to wherever they are. You are my beacon, and until I can find another, you are with me. If I were hindered by regret, I might say I'm sorry. The truth is, I'm not in the least. This is about survival, and I have no intention of dying. Not when being alive feels so wonderful." Feeling desperate, I reached into my lab coat pocket and pulled out my pocket watch. I always carried it with me, a Christmas gift from Jessica. I could remember that day clearly, a memory that never strayed far from my heart. "Open it, Dad, it's from me?" Her smile was captivating. "Oh, really? And did Mom help you pick it out?" "No, I chose this one myself." I slowly tore open the wrapping paper, savoring the moment. Finally, I pulled out the watch and opened its face, revealing a remarkable design inside. "This is wonderful, sweetie. Dad loves it." She looked at me with curious eyes. "What's wrong, sweetie? Don't you understand? What's it for?" I chuckled. "Of course, to tell time." She shook her head. "No, I didn't say that. I said I made it so you would remember." A pang of guilt snuck into me as a tear rolled down my cheek. "I know Dad works a lot, but you'll always come home to me. I promise." She jumped into my arms and I hugged her tightly, my sweet little girl. I looked down at the engraving on the watch, "To Dad, love, Jessica." It was time to go home. It was time to end this. I threw the pocket watch against the wall as hard as I could. It shattered into 1,000 pieces. Then I knelt down and picked up the tiny shards of glass that fell at my feet. "Garrett, what are you doing?" With the glass in my hand, I looked up at him. "I'll never let you have them. Consider your bridge to the outside world closed." Using the glass, I slashed my arm. The cuts were long and deep enough that I was sure I would bleed to death in a few minutes, effectively severing any connection he had to my family. At least then, they would have a fighting chance. "No, you'll ruin everything." The last thing I remembered before losing consciousness was the sound of a door bursting open. Then everything faded. I woke up at my desk, positioned exactly as before. After collecting my wits and recalling what had happened, I jumped up and turned to the room. My doppelganger was standing just outside the door. "Calm down, Garrett, you'll be fine." I looked down at my arm. There were no wounds. "I have the subtle ability to manipulate time. You are now as you were just before entering the room." "And my family?" he sighed. "That was a daring move there, trying to end yourself. I didn't expect that." "If I had known you humans were so self-sacrificing, I wouldn't have revealed so much. Your family is fine." He could see the skepticism etched on my face. "See for yourself." He pointed to the phone on my desk. I hesitantly picked it up and put it to my ear. "Go ahead, call." I dialed the hotel number and asked the operator to connect me to my wife. To my delight, she answered. "Garrett Harold Covenwood, this isn't how you get into my good books." It was wonderful to hear her voice. "Is Jessica there with you?" "Yes, how did you know?" "Thank God. They were both fine. Can I talk to her?" The next voice I heard was my daughter's, as joyful as ever. "Hi, Daddy, are you coming to see us now?" My sweet little girl, safe and sound. "Yes, sweetie, Daddy's coming. It's time for Daddy to come home." "Yay," she cheered. Elizabeth took back the phone. "Don't you dare play games with her emotions, Garrett." "I'm not, I'll be right there. What room are you in, by the way?" I breathed a sigh of relief. "Room 102, I sighed softly with relief. "Nothing, see you soon, I love you." I hung up and looked back at my evil doppelganger. "So now what?" I asked. "Well, until I figure out a way around your heroism, you and your family are safe. It sounds too good to be true, but don't you need to eat? Why don't you just kill me now?" He stepped closer with a serious expression and leaned in as close as possible. "Why would I waste my time with an appetizer when you'll lead me to the main course? I'd rather have all three of them than just you, especially the infant. Their souls are much more succulent than used ones." My blood boiled, but I remained silent, fearing the consequences. "I will have them, Garrett, mark my words." He slowly stepped back, turned around, and walked towards the room. Then he looked at me one last time and laughed loudly. "I hope you don't mind if I keep this appearance for a while. How shall I put it? I like it." With that, he vanished into thin air, never to be seen or heard from again. At least, that's the hope. Immediately after the incident, I took Elizabeth and Jessica home, packed our belongings, and drove as far away from that room as possible. I swore I would never work in that lab again, as long as I lived, or anywhere that kept me away from my family. From now on, they came first. If that entity ever returns, I will be waiting. I will never let it take them. Ladies and gentlemen, science, progress, discovery, those beautiful words, those noble dreams. But sometimes we open doors that should not be opened, we awaken things that should not be awakened, and we must live with the consequences. Garrett, the man who wrote this letter, he escaped. His family is safe. But that entity is still somewhere in room 371, hungry, waiting. And the most terrifying thing? It can take the form of anyone. It could be him, it could be his wife, it could be anyone reading these lines. How do you know? How can you be sure? This is a reminder, my friends. There are boundaries in this universe set for a reason. There are secrets of space and time that humans are not meant to touch, and there is a price to pay for boundless curiosity. The father in last night's story, who lost his wife and child. He tried to cling to them through delusion. Garrett in tonight's story, he fought to protect them from something beyond our comprehension. Love, it can save us, it can destroy us, and sometimes it forces us to make choices no one should ever have to make. If you are a scientist listening to me, please remember this story before opening the next door, before the next discovery. Ask yourself, am I willing to pay the price? Because sometimes knowledge comes at a cost, and it's not always worth it. This is Jeff, and this is Midnight Horror Stories. Keep your family close. Never take them for granted. And if you ever work in a lab, if you ever see a room numbered 371, run and don't look back. It's past midnight, the hour of late-night students, the hour of dorm room secrets. The hour when roommates become strangers. Welcome back to Midnight Horror Stories. I'm Jeff. Tonight, we have an unfinished story. A story whose narrator may no longer have the chance to tell the rest. It came through a voice message. Not an email, not a letter, but a hastily recorded voice message, the voice trembling with something knocking on a door in the background. The caller only said, "If my brother hears this, please warn everyone, don't look for the clan of the Red Wolf. Don't watch those videos, and if anyone you know changes, run." The line cut off, and I warn you, it has no ending. Some horror stories never end, they just stop. I think my roommate joined a cult. He's been acting strange lately. He's always been a bit eccentric, but not to this extent. Never like this. Before continuing, let me tell you a little about the past. I'm a student at Bridgewater University in Massachusetts. I share a dorm room with Wallace. We both major in computer science, and that's all we ever talk about on the rare occasions we actually speak to each other. We don't have much else in common, you know? Wallace is a strange guy. He's very socially awkward and doesn't have many friends, if any. I've only ever seen him talk to professors and once to a security guard. Wallace is a recluse. Another of Wallace's quirks is his obsessive-compulsive nature. He conducts himself in a very specific way and has a daily routine planned down to the smallest detail that never changes. When he wakes up, he brushes his teeth, makes sure to gargle, and spits exactly 3 times. Then he puts on a striped shirt, followed by khaki pants. His wardrobe never changes. He always arrives at class 5 minutes early and submits assignments a day before the deadline, always like that. How do I know all this? Well, as a socially awkward recluse, Wallace doesn't tell me these things. I don't think he even realizes that his routines are manifestations of OCD. It's just something I've realized during the 2 years I've lived with the guy. It's almost impossible not to notice. Knowing Wallace's usual behavioral patterns, I noticed something was wrong. He was sleeping in his clothes, hadn't brushed his teeth, and hadn't submitted assignments on time all week. He didn't even sleep in our dorm room last night. I hadn't seen him in over a day. Wallace has his quirks, but he's a good person. Even though I don't know him well, I started to worry. That worry justified me hacking into his laptop to see what he had been up to. It was the only thing I could think of to do. When I found his laptop and turned it on, I felt like an idiot. The machine was as clean as new, at least to my eyes. You see, while I pride myself on my hacking skills and tech knowledge, Wallace is much better in this field. It's safe to say I wouldn't find a single shred of evidence of his whereabouts or what he had been doing. No logs, no browsing history, nothing. A casual acquaintance or even a friend might stop there, but I always go too far. This is especially true when it comes to helping others. I always feel the need to lend a hand whenever possible. The worry amplified until it became an almost morbid anxiety. It's a real curse. Feeling anxious, I thought about any other potential ways to continue my hunt for the truth. That's when something dawned on me. As I said earlier, sometimes I saw Wallace talking to the security guard in the hallway. He was the only person I had ever seen him talk to at length. Maybe he would know more about Wallace's situation. That evening, I left my dorm room and wandered the hallway. Eventually, I found Chuck, the security guard. I tried to be gentle as I approached him because he had his back to me and was known to be hard of hearing. However, when I tapped him on the shoulder, he startled. "Oh my, you almost scared me to death." Chuck chuckled through his bushy gray beard. "What can I do for you, son?" I told Chuck about my predicament and how worried I was about Wallace, not having seen him in a while. Chuck's cheerful expression turned into one of uneasiness and tension. He seemed to know a little more than I did. "Well, Wallace is a good kid, and we do chat from time to time. I happen to know where he might be, but I wouldn't be comfortable revealing the details of his social life to just anyone who asks, even if you are his roommate." Social life? Wallace didn't have a social life. I pressed Chuck to tell me the secret. I really tried to convey a great deal of concern for Wallace's well-being. Being a good-natured security guard, Chuck eventually relented. All right, I understand. Just please don't tell him I told you, okay?" I nodded, eagerly awaiting his revelation of Wallace's whereabouts. Wallace has been feeling pretty down lately. He doesn't have anyone to talk to besides me. He wants friends, people he can hang out with and talk to, you know? I listened carefully, looking for the detail I desperately sought. So Wallace got on what he called, what was it? The dark web. There he found a group of people. They call themselves the Clan of the Red Wolf or something like that. I guess they invited him to one of their meetings. That's probably where he is. He seemed pretty excited telling me about it. In fact, that's all he's talked about all week. There it was. That was the piece of information I needed. The key to finding Wallace. I thanked Chuck and waved goodnight as I rushed back to my dorm room. It sounded like Wallace had connected with a group of like-minded individuals, and they had finally invited him to meet in person. I had their strange name, Clan of the Red Wolf, and that was all I needed to find them on the dark web myself. Soon, I would be able to find my missing roommate. It took quite a while, but I finally found the dark web forum related to the so-called clan. It only contained a description and a series of videos. This was the description as it appeared on the page. "Welcome to your new belief system. We are the Clan of the Red Wolf, and we are here to help." There are 7 educational videos on this page. Each video is custom designed for a specific belief we wish to share with you. Over the course of 1 week, you are required to watch these programs to understand our doctrine. If you make it through the final video, you will be invited to our den. Good luck. A strange synopsis, but no less than I expected. Scrolling down further, I noticed all the videos had similar titles, Day 1, Day 2, and so on. Naturally, I watched them. The entire series reminded me of old wartime propaganda. It was done in an old-school animation style with a wolf as the main character. Not a normal wolf, but a cartoon wolf. Imagine a character similar to Wile E. Coyote. In each video, the wolf learned a new clan value from a humorous male narrator. Not unlike old cartoons, the humorous wolf went against the narrator's wishes and suffered the consequences before learning the lesson. Each video ended with the narrator saying, "Join the pack, you'll never have to feel alone again." I guess that was the selling point for Wallace: loneliness. I'll share with you a brief transcript from each video along with any points of interest. Day 1, Wild Animals. Treat plants and animals with dignity and respect. They are human too. Trees provide you with air to breathe, and animals share the earth with you, keeping you from loneliness. They deserve much more than you. The wolf pees on a tree, the tree falls, crushing it and revealing blood and brain matter inside. Day 2, Thicker than blood. Your blood is the most important material in your body. The clan requires a blood sample upon joining our organization. This is a requirement for all new members. Our blood must flow as one so we can work together and save the planet. The wolf enters a room full of shadowy figures in hooded cloaks, presumably clan members. All members are lining up for blood samples. The wolf refuses to give blood and walks away. A cloaked figure sneaks up behind it and slashes its throat with a dagger. The video focuses on the wolf bleeding to death in a matter of moments. Day 3, Obey or Suffer. Remember what happened to our friend when it didn't give blood for the common good? It didn't follow our organization's rules, so it had to suffer the consequences. Remember, the clan's laws are very important. You must obey or die. Trust me, it's worth it. Again, it shows the wolf bleeding to death, only this time there are several cloaked figures on top of it, repeatedly stabbing its corpse. Day 4, Oath of Secrecy. The clan of the Red Wolf is often misunderstood. Because of this, it is important to never tell anyone about our existence under any circumstances. You are only allowed to speak about clan activities with other clan members. Break this rule, and you will die. The wolf is shown talking to its wolf friends and showing them its new cloak. A cloaked figure enters the frame with what appears to be a semi-automatic weapon and opens fire. The wolves fall to the ground dead. The cloaked figure gives a thumbs up before the video ends. Day 5, Learn and Understand. If you are allowed into our inner sanctum, you will be greeted with the knowledge we follow, the word of the Red Wolf. And so will you. You will be expected to learn and understand its doctrines. Otherwise, you will fail not only the clan but the world. The wolf is seen in a classroom-like setting taking a test. It submits its paper to a cloaked teacher and receives an F. The entire class points and laughs at it, then pulls out a pile of medieval weapons from their cloaks and approaches the wolf. The wolf gulps before the video ends. Day 6, Tasks and Rituals. As a recruit, you will be required to perform various tasks, from the mundane to the miraculous. Most of these tasks will involve obtaining ingredients for our rituals. As boring as it may sound, it is the most important thing you can do for the clan. Rituals are what give the clan its power. Without this power, we cannot hope to eliminate what plagues the world. The wolf fails to bring ingredients to the clan members for the ritual. It quickly cuts to the wolf being sacrificed on a black altar, above a pentagram carved into the floor. It is beaten, cut, and finally torn apart by its fellow clan members. Day 7, Mortals. When accepted as a full member of the clan, you are no longer considered human. You will be one of us. From that point on, you are discouraged from any interaction with humans unless it is deemed necessary for the common good. Humans are vile, filthy, disgusting, and dangerous creatures. We seek to eradicate them once and for all. Any human who knows of our existence and is not deemed worthy to join must be killed. Nature is your only friend. The wolf is walking in a main street-like environment and can be seen waving to everyone it meets. It comes across a clan member, who then stabs it in the stomach with a long blade and tosses it to the side of the road, where it is subsequently run over by multiple cars. The content of the videos was truly shocking. I almost couldn't believe such a cult could actually exist, let alone that Wallace would join them. He must have been truly lonely. The final video faded out with the usual call to join the pack, and then dissolved into a screen with a series of numbers. That was my next clue. I could only assume it was a cipher that would reveal the coordinates of the clan's den. That, I thought, must be where Wallace had gone. I wrote down the cipher and immediately began researching to start cracking it. Just as I was in the middle of it, something dawned on me. One of the videos said you couldn't talk to anyone about the clan under any circumstances, but Wallace had told Chuck. That didn't make sense. Wallace was rigid about rules. Another fact hit me. The video said you could only talk about clan activities with other clan members. What if Chuck was one of them? Chuck could be stationed at the university to recruit members, and he simply nudged Wallace in the right direction. He could have played dumb with me when I asked him. So, either Chuck was a clan member, or Wallace broke a cardinal rule. Neither theory held much water. If Chuck was a member, why would he tell me anything without recruiting or killing me? And if Wallace was so eager to join such a strict cult, why would he disobey their wishes? I couldn't make sense of it from any angle. I finally surrendered to the notion that perhaps Wallace simply overlooked the rule out of his excitement. He was finally going to have friends, so he had to tell someone. This didn't completely convince me, but I had to get back to solving the cipher. I didn't have time to wallow in uncertainties. Just then, there was a knock on my dorm room door, followed by a voice, "Chuck here, security guard, just checking your room." Chuck never cleaned dorm rooms, that wasn't his job. "I'm fine." I yelled, hoping he would leave me alone. The knocking stopped. There was a long silence, followed by a slight metallic creak. The doorknob was turning. And that's where the story ends. No follow-up messages, no updates, nothing. I tried to contact the sender. The phone number was no longer active. The email address bounced back. It was as if this person never existed. I researched Bridgewater State University. It's real, but there are no records of a clan of the Red Wolf, no missing students, no reports of cults. But here's the strangest thing. When I tried to search for this story online to see if anyone else had heard about it, I found one thing. A single post on a deleted forum with only one line remaining. If you're looking for the clan of the Red Wolf, it means they've already found you. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know what to believe. Is this a true story, or just a well-crafted creepypasta? Is there really a student out there who needs help? Or is someone playing a prank on me, playing a prank on all of us? But if it's real, if the clan of the Red Wolf actually exists, if they actually recruit members from lonely, vulnerable students, if they actually have those rules, those videos, those rituals, then how many other Wallaces are out there? How many lonely students are being drawn into something they can't escape? This is my final reminder for tonight, my friends. If you are a student, if you are looking for connection, friendship, a place to belong, please be careful. Not every group is safe. Not every community is kind, and not every invitation is worth accepting. If something sounds too good to be true, if they promise you'll never be alone again, never be hurt again, will be part of something bigger, ask yourself what they're asking of you. Your blood, your absolute loyalty, your silence. Because once you've given them those things, you may never get them back. And if you have a roommate, a friend, a loved one who's acting strange, who's changing, who's becoming secretive and withdrawn, don't ignore it. Don't think it's just a phase. Reach out to them, ask them questions, let them know you care. Because sometimes the care of a single person is all it takes to save someone from falling into darkness. It's late night, the last sounds of the city gradually fading, only the wind whistling through window cracks remains. This is the moment when untold stories begin to find their way to us. Hello everyone, this is Jeff, joining you on this nightly horror storytelling program. Tonight, I've just received a special email. The sender, a grandfather living separated from his family due to the pandemic, shared a story with me that almost stopped his heart. The letter had no name, just a short subject line. I just discovered video footage of a strange man hiding in my granddaughter's bedroom. I know you're all very curious, so let's read this letter together. Dear Show, the hardest thing about this damn lockdown has been the lack of human touch, of warm hugs. I still see my son and his family. I talk to them on FaceTime every day, something called a video call that people taught me to use. But my granddaughter Malosi is 6 years old, which means she's changing every day. Just a few days ago, I asked her if she wanted me to read her the Mullen comic book she still loved. She shrugged, "Not really, Grandpa. I don't like Mullen anymore." Head spun. It took me longer than before to recover from that shock. Are you okay, Grandpa? Malosi asked. I'm fine, Malosi, I lied. Since when don't you like Mulin anymore? I thought she was your favorite princess. The little girl looked away from the screen, a bored expression on her face. I don't know, for a long time. Children are always frustrated because they think they're powerless against the adults in their lives. Little do they know, their ability to break our hearts is absolute. That night, I put the book in the attic. I keep a box up there filled with things I don't want to throw away, but know I'll never use again. Most likely, my son will toss that box in the trash after I die. I had been a part of her life for almost 2,000 consecutive days before everything suddenly became too dangerous for an old man like me to be around family. It was tough for all of us, but they moved forward. I didn't. I still had other books, and I was thankful she hadn't outgrown Where the Wild Things Are, yet. Even I hadn't outgrown liking that book. The little girl was alone in her bedroom, almost ready for bed, when I suddenly noticed the man in the corner of the room. My heart pounded. The wild rumpus in the story had just begun. I couldn't stop reading. Why are you breathing funny, Grandpa? Malosi asked, confused. The curtain fluttered. A long, floor-length curtain hung right next to her bed, and it was clearly concealing the figure of a tall man. As I watched, a bony hand gripped the edge of the curtain and pulled it closer, clearly trying to hide. He was listening. I couldn't let him know that I had discovered him. My granddaughter's life depended on it, but my pulse refused to slow down. Oh well, I've lived with bigger lies than this. I cleared my throat slightly. Malosi, when someone reaches my age, they're proud just to still be breathing. I chuckled. The little girl didn't laugh, but my voice sounded perfectly calm, even though my heart wasn't cooperating. I was sweating as I read the part where the monsters begged Max to stay, claiming, "We love you so." One eye was fixed on the man in the corner of the room, but I was still putting on an Oscar-worthy performance. But time was running out. I couldn't tell Malosi to call her parents. He would grab her before she could leave the room. I was using my cell phone to talk to her, and I didn't have a computer or landline. I'll never need it, my son had said before forcing me to cancel the service, so there was no way to call someone for help. I had to keep her on the call. The curtain rustled again. The man was getting impatient, and why wouldn't he be? He was clearly waiting for the little girl to fall asleep so he could strike. The only thing standing in his way was my bedtime story. My pulse quickened. I felt like I was floating. I had a bottle of Sectril in the bathroom. It wouldn't fix my heart, nothing could, as there's no warranty on body parts that will eventually turn to ash or rot. But it would help me calm down enough to get through the next few minutes with a clearer head. But I had to stand up and walk into the bathroom. I had to break my concentration. The dirty black brim of a hat poked out from behind the curtain. I didn't have time for Sectril. I didn't have much time left, and I hummed steadily. It was still hot. I didn't want to close the book because that would mean my plan was over. I had nothing left. I closed the book, a lump rolled down the curtain. The man was running his fingers along the fabric, itching to get out. Malosi yawned. Do you have another story, Grandpa? I swallowed. I'm not sure where the Mulin book is anymore, so. Okay, she sighed. Good night, Grandpa. She reached out to turn off the phone while the curtain behind her twitched. Wait, I commanded calmly. She stopped. We don't choose the hand we're dealt. That was the damned truth. But when I had only one card left, I had to play it as if I held the keys to the entire kingdom. I closed my eyes, exhaled, then opened them and looked directly at her. Malosi, you need to listen very carefully and don't waste a second. There's a man behind your curtain who's about to come out and hurt you. Don't call your mom or dad because there's no time for them to save you. You need to focus, close your eyes, be happy, relax. What makes you shine the brightest? Her face went pale, then she closed her eyes. Malosi, last year Mom and Dad took you to the Florida Keys, and we went to an island where we were the only ones. Dad said you could be the princess of the island, as long as we were the only ones there. A pang of pain cut through my chest. I should have gone with them, but the doctor forbade me from traveling far due to a recent hypertension diagnosis. They had gone without me and had the best vacation of their lives. A hand with dirty fingernails pulled the curtain open. I tried to appear calm. You are a princess, Malosi, remember that? I smiled. A man emerged from the shadows. The phone vibrated as my hand trembled. He's behind you, isn't he, Grandpa? She whispered. Yes, I replied in a barely audible voice. He wore a black fisherman's hat that obscured his face, a long cloak that covered most of his body. His dirty hands were the only flesh exposed. I forced a smile. You remember that you can be a princess, you can be anything you want, and no one can tell you otherwise as long as you don't believe them. Do you understand? His hat brim brushed the floor with a soft clatter. She froze. Malosi, do you understand me? Clatter. She blinked once, pressed her lips together, and nodded. Then a calm settled over her face, and she smiled. A little girl is a princess, if only one person who loves her says so. You see, you will always be a princess to me, Malosi. Clatter. Always. A peace enveloped her, and in that moment, it would have been unrealistic to ask for anything more. I took a shaky breath. I realized that in a few seconds, I had watched her grow up a little, and I had lost a small piece of myself to the mundane reality that we approach death by dying in parts. Clatter, clatter. Now, I commanded softly. You need to face this. Malosi, it's not fair to ask this of you at your age, but I can't stop it anymore. She smiled calmly. Clatter. Then my granddaughter stood up, turned around, and faced the man in her room. He reached out a dirty hand towards her as she closed her eyes, then she kicked out one leg, her pink sock connecting with his knee with a sickening squelch. The man screamed as his leg bent sideways, and he fell forward. Malosi brought a fist up in the air. His momentum carried the full force of his fall into her tiny hand. He bounced off like a firecracker, flying across the room and slamming into the opposite wall. Plaster cracked and spread like a spiderweb around him, and he slumped to the floor in a heap. Broken plaster and dust fell, covering the man, but he lay still. He probably wouldn't move much in the coming weeks, considering his heel was lying next to his ear. Malosi, my son's voice yelled from downstairs, followed by panicked footsteps. My granddaughter slumped to the floor, gasping as her eyelids fluttered shut. I'm so tired, Grandpa. It's okay, I promised weakly, my voice small and faint. It's okay, you did wonderfully, you're safe. You're safe. Her head tilted to the side. That was very hard, please, Grandpa, she sighed. Don't make me do that again. My son's footsteps ran down the hallway towards her room. It's okay, I promise, I said, smiling and wiping my eyes. I promise you're safe. I took a deep, shaky breath as the bedroom door burst open. You can sleep soundly, Malosi. You're part of a very, very special family. As I spoke those last words, my granddaughter's head had fallen to her shoulder. The bedroom door burst open. Malosi! Sami screamed across the room as he knelt down and picked up his daughter. The phone screen spun, and I had to close my eyes to avoid motion sickness. When I opened them again, my daughter-in-law was looking back at me, her face as white as paper. Dad, what happened? The man in the corner of the room, I gasped. Damn it, it's hard to focus. The survival calm that had guided me through the attack was now dissipating, leaving unfiltered adrenaline tearing at my raw nerves. I tried again and failed to control my heartbeat. He came for her, Tina, I gasped. There's more to it. I'm sure you both have to. The phone screen spun again before my son's face appeared. Dad, how did he get in here? What did Malosi do to him? Sami, they found you, they found her. None of you are safe. Did he touch her? Is she hurt? When Sami was 9, he jumped off the roof and landed on his hands. He ran into the house, sobbing, and I almost fainted when I saw his forearm hanging in a Z-shape. He closed his eyes and pushed the injury towards me. I could see the anxiety leave him as my 40-year-old heart absorbed it like a sponge. He trusted me to handle everything. Fortunately, my heart was strong enough to handle it at the time. Whether it still possessed that strength was a question that would remain unanswered because he no longer relied on me to take away his pain. No, I replied emphatically. Son, you should see her, Sami. You'd be so proud. We'll have to talk later, Dad. Sami hung up. I called him back immediately. I knew enough about how phones work to understand the meaning when it went straight to voicemail after 2 rings. I put the phone down and opened the floodgates, finally allowing the emotions to permeate every fiber of my being. I am an old man. Traumatic experiences affect us differently than they do you. We don't think of experiences as a call to grow, because each step forward brings death closer. I felt my mind shattering. I could see a lily-white iceberg cracking as a fissure widened, splitting 2 sides that would never be whole again. But the fragment hadn't fully fallen yet. I opened my eyes and shuffled into the bathroom for a dose of Sectral, then tried to relax my trembling hands. It turned out Malosi was much better at calming herself than I was. I was very proud of her. Then I gritted my teeth, turned, and walked out the door. Sami and his family were on the other side of town, and I didn't have enough time to drive. The average car ride takes 31 minutes and 53 seconds. The clock was ticking. I had a few miles to cover and only a few minutes to get there, so I ran. We are a very special family. The front door was unlocked. That wasn't a good sign. I slammed the door shut behind me and locked it. Sami, I called. Tina, Malosi. I realized I might actually have a heart attack right in my son's house because I couldn't find a way to calm myself down. I realized with a strange calm that such an outcome might be acceptable. Slowly, I walked up the stairs. Come out, everyone. I need to know you're okay. The bedroom door in front of me slowly opened. I suddenly realized I should have grabbed a weapon, a knife, a rock, damn it, a rubber duck, anything. But now there was nothing to do but stand and wait for the person on the other side to see me. It was Tina. Relief flooded me as I ran into her arms for a hug. Where are Sami and Malosi? I asked, my voice trembling. Together in our bedroom, she whispered. I pulled back and dashed through the door. Sami was holding his sleeping daughter's body. She looked so fragile, but not as much as him. I still had fleeting memories of childhood beliefs that parents, even when they were unfair, possessed a foundational strength that could withstand all the mundane troubles a child faced. It was only later in life that we realized no parent knew what they were doing, but the best ones could pretend with deep confidence. Hello, son, I offered calmly. Hi, Dad, Sami sighed. Both were silent for a beat. We need to go, I finally said, small but firm. Tonight, right now. Sami closed his eyes. No, nothing could make me angrier than a child who wouldn't listen, especially if that child was a grown-ass man. My heartbeat had never slowed down, but now it raced again. Sami, I retorted, louder than intended. There are things we want but cannot have. There are things I need you to decide for yourself. You can't control what's happening. It was my choice when you were a child. It's your choice now that you're an adult, so act like one, I roared. I didn't intend to sound angry, despite what was conveyed. Malosi stirred in his arms. She'll wake up soon. Both had so much they wanted to say, but suddenly couldn't get past the silence. What do they want from us? Tina interjected softly. I looked over to where she stood, slender and delicate, yet somehow more resolute than either of them in this moment. Don't you understand? I pressed. Panic began to flare at the edges of my mind. After all that, she really didn't understand what would happen if she was found, if all of us were found. Dad, at some point we have to live our lives, otherwise the cure is worse. They'll put you in Harley Quinn heaven, Sami, even at your age, and you'll never get out. I could hear my pulse in my ears now, but I stopped trying to fight it. You too, Tina, but you'll never see your daughter again. I'll die in a lab. And you probably will too, Sami, and we'll be the lucky ones. I tried and failed to discreetly wipe away tears of frustration. It's better if we all die. I would certainly choose that fate for us if given the alternative. The ensuing silence was strong enough to feel on a physical level. Malosi broke it, snuggling into her father's shirt. Daddy, I want to go to sleep. Tina looked at me, eyes wide. Dad, I understand what you're saying. Her eyes darted back and forth between Sami and me. Both of us understand. Listen, get some good sleep and let me come back in the morning. We'll all be in a better position to decide our next move. I closed my eyes and gripped my hair in frustration. There was an unconscious man in the next room who had come to kidnap Malosi. He was working for others who knew where we lived. I opened my eyes. Have you checked if he's awake? Do you know if he's told anyone what happened? You didn't call the police, did you? They almost certainly tapped your phones before acting. If you've called anyone since the attack, you've just given them all the information they need. Sami squirmed uncomfortably as Malosi wriggled in his arms. Dad, there's no way they could intercept our phones, and the police are better equipped too. I punched the wall in frustration. Don't you understand how powerful Delora is, Sami? It's too late too. The sound of breaking glass cut me off. Everyone froze downstairs. The door vibrated as someone pushed from outside. Nausea flooded me as the loud clang of a turning lock echoed through the silent house. The front door burst open, and a man's footsteps stepped boldly inside. He pressed the barrel of a gun to my forehead, and I winced. My wrists tugged reflexively against the rope. Although I found a little slack, it wasn't enough to escape. I couldn't change what was before me, so I relaxed. I smiled. What are you laughing about? He asked through teeth clenched around a cigarette. If we can't smile in our final moments, then how have we lived our lives? I asked calmly. He ran a hand across his dirty, bearded cheek, then spat the cigarette into the trash pile on the truck floor. You're a weird motherfucker. I don't know what Delora wants with you. He tilted his head. You're still worth a pile of cash even as a corpse. Not as much as when I'm alive. Right, damn it. You picked a bad night to be found. He looked around the cramped, windowless truck with its ceiling holding my ropes taut. How many people do you think could fit in here? I breathed slowly, wondering if I was about to die or live another 60 years, depending on his decision. He growled, lit another cigarette, and placed the flickering lighter on the center console. He still held the gun pressed against my forehead. "Tell me, old man, I found you with a bag containing only a bottle of oil and some goddamn prayer beads." He inhaled deeply from his cigarette. "How did you plan to defend yourself, unarmed?" I smiled again, sadder this time. "We all die, every one of us, it's only a matter of time. I want to be free, so I accept that." He snorted, "That's fucking stupid." The air grew thicker and I could feel his finger tightening. I wasn't breathing. His cell phone rang and I exhaled the breath I didn't know I was holding. He listened, cursed, and hung up. Byron broke his leg wrapped around his head. Damn it, I told him not to go after the little girl alone. The man lowered the gun and turned to sit in the driver's seat. "We've got less than a minute to deal with this. You need to stay put. Don't worry, if there's not enough room for everyone, I'll find you a decent ditch." He started the engine. "Things are bad. Damn it, things are bad." He spun the truck 180 degrees and slammed on the gas. I only had the ropes to hold me in place as we sped through the night. I felt nauseous. "The little girl?" I asked tentatively. "Everyone, right?" he muttered, driving recklessly down the dark road. "He'll share a spot with them, so move over." I pulled fruitlessly against the ropes. "Can you tell me where we're going?" He snorted again. "A whole family of freaks and Byron went in alone. Stupid bastard." I felt it was important to keep him talking, so I did. "How big is the family?" The man spat on the floor. His wad of phlegm lay still, quivering like jelly. "3, mom, dad, little girl. Delora pays a lot, especially for the little girl. Damn Byron, they're fucking dangerous." He pressed the accelerator harder and the lighter fell off the center console. It hit the floor and slid backward. I silently blocked it with my shoe and held it in place. "Do you know anything about C4? He asked. He tapped a large bag on the passenger seat. A few seconds passed before I realized he was talking to me. I knew it wasn't easy to detonate but very effective. I knew that's why people like him carried it. And I knew that people ask such questions because they like to hear themselves talk. "Why don't you tell me?" I asked, trying to sound curious. He scoffed. Byron was driving a truck full of C4 while being held at gunpoint by a girl he had just kidnapped, drove the truck off the road, flipped it, killing the girl. But the C4 didn't react at all. He laughed loudly. "Then we used it to collapse a 4-story building." He sighed. "It's there when you need it. It'll do a good job with a 2-story house." He stopped the truck a distance from a normal-looking house. "Don't go anywhere," he joked before pulling the bag off the passenger seat and sliding out the door. I stayed still for a second, then I took off my shoes, picked up the lighter with my foot and brought it to my hand before putting it back in my shoe. Then I pressed my chest pocket close to my fingertips, pulling out a small bottle of massage oil from it. I quickly poured all of it onto my wrists, lubricating the ropes as much as possible. Then I pulled hard. My wrists started to slip out, but not entirely. The ropes were too tight. Trembling, I flicked the lighter and brought it to the oil-soaked rope. A faint flame danced up, licking along the edge of the rope and touching my palm with a hateful tongue. The pain was immediately unbearable, so I closed my eyes and drew the pain inward and I felt free. Then I pulled, my hand met resistance and I pulled harder. Nothing happened. I doubled my effort, pulling with everything I could muster. Still nothing. The flame was bigger now and the pain increased with it. Again, I drew the pain inward. I didn't resist it. I pulled, I inhaled, the rope hissed, it snapped, its edges fraying. I pulled harder as a tear slowly opened, strand by strand the rope tore. And in that moment I realized I wouldn't stop pulling, simply because there was no other choice. It turns out we like to say we can't notice, we don't feel uncomfortable when we're scared of our own potential. The rope melted, cracked, broke, and hurt more than I imagined. And then I was free. I gasped, lying on the truck floor and checking my hands, not a single scratch. It's funny looking back on moments that felt as painful as imaginable, only to realize they were small blessings. The bottle of oil was empty, so I let the empty bottle go. A pat to my pocket confirmed the rosary was in place. That was enough. I quietly opened the door, wondering how far I could run before the man realized I was gone. Far enough, I imagined. I thought of the family in the house about to be attacked, and I tried not to cry. It would be a fool's errand to intervene. I had to accept that, and I ran. I didn't stop until I reached their front door. I tried to open it, but it was locked. I froze. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my captor going around the back of the house. Remembering the C4, I realized he was almost certainly attaching explosives to the structure before approaching the unsuspecting family inside. Whatever choice I made now, I would probably die. I punched my elbow through the small window next to the doorknob, retracted it fast enough to avoid injury. Then I reached in and fumbled with the lock as I jiggled the door in its frame to test when it would open. I felt the lock give way, and then I turned the knob and opened the door. I quickly stepped inside. At the foot of the stairs, I yelled urgently upstairs, knowing they might attack and kill me if I didn't warn them of my presence. "Please listen to me. You are in great danger right now and need to leave this house. I know you don't know who I am, but I promise I'm here to help and you need to trust me. My name is Sebastian and I have a lot to tell you. I'm here to help and you need to trust me. My name is Sebastian. The ones who want me dead are also trying to hurt." Silence descended on the room. The walls seemed to hold their breath, both theirs and mine, and I quickly understood that something was very wrong. I looked up the stairs into the darkness and saw no one. I looked to my left, I looked to my right, I looked up at the ceiling. That's where she was, floating down at me with an anger and longing that made me once again wonder why I had decided this house was the best place to die. A red light cast from the top of the stairs. My mind reeled as I realized I was looking at a baseball bat, glowing bright red, gripped tightly by a frightened man whose sweat-drenched face reflected the impossible object in his hand. Clearly, these people had mastered both flight and the ability to generate thermal energy in objects they touched. It seemed they were a very special family. "You're the second person to break into this house tonight, and you're about to be the second to be broken by it." The man growled in an unstable mixture of fear and anger. William Faulkner once said that time is dead as long as it is being ticked off by little wheels. Only when the clocks stop does time come to life. I forced myself to remember this as the tension of a threatening moment consumed me, and I needed to smile instead. "My friend, I'm almost certainly going to die here tonight. But the fate of your little girl is still very much undecided, and you need to realize there are more people than just me coming to your house." I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. You have to make a decision now because you can't restore a past moment, and what's done can never be undone. I looked straight up at the woman floating on the ceiling. "There's a man right outside your house who's about to hurt you in ways that have no cure. I'll find him, and he'll attack me. This will distract him for no more than 30 seconds. Run!" I turned and walked towards the front door. Psalm 91 tells us that we shall not fear the terror of the night, and that passage always brought me comfort. I realized for the first time that it never says we are safe from the threat. Our call is simply to eliminate fear regardless of the outcome. Hands on my shoulders almost threw me to the floor. I stumbled for footing. The woman had flown down and was on top of me. The man was rushing to my side. "You have 1 minute to tell us who you are and what's happening, and that minute starts when you open the door. Talk." His fear was clearly overshadowing his anger, and that was a very dangerous thing. "No," I replied simply but urgently. "We're out of time. You have to let me distract him, then you need to run and never stop. This is your only chance." I turned towards the door, but he grabbed my shoulder and held me tight. I closed my eyes. "I've told you everything you need to know. Please trust me." "Trust is in short supply, friend." His grip was painfully strong. "It wouldn't be faith if it wasn't," I replied. "You can convince me if you try." He raised the bat high above his head. It glowed white. I suddenly realized he had almost certainly killed for his daughter more than once. "I'm sorry," I replied, wretched, but the moment had passed. It was too late. My captor from the truck appeared from the shadows, a gun in each hand. He was aiming at both the man and the woman. Clearly, he didn't see me as a threat. However, the two of them were facing me, so they didn't see him immediately. They noticed my reaction. Slowly, they turned around. "I don't know how you got out of my truck, but you're fast becoming more trouble than you're worth." He snarled before spitting on the floor. He fumbled at his belt, pulled out a pair of handcuffs, and tossed them to the man with the bat. He instinctively released me and caught the handcuffs. "Nice catch, Sami. Now you can throw that bat out the window if you don't want me to shoot your wife in the chest," he barked. Sami hesitated for only a second, then he threw the only weapon through the broken glass I had created. The other man laughed loudly, his blackened teeth showing beneath his scraggly black beard. "That's the only card you had to play." "Idiot," he sneered. "Now cuff this bastard to the hot water pipe. You're not going anywhere this time, sweetie." I didn't resist as Sami obediently locked my right wrist to the pipe, forcing me to sit for what was to come next. Still holding both pistols high, the man slowly approached the woman. Both she and Sami stood still. The man leaned his face into her neck. He smelled her hair. "Just like Mommy used to smell," he purred, licking his lips. "Speaking of Mommy, where's your little girl?" Her lips were pressed together and pale. He pressed the gun barrel to her throat. "There's a hard way out and a harder way out, so you'd best give me what I need." The stairs creaked. She shook her head. The first tears began to fall down her cheeks as Sami took a half step away from me and towards his wife. "Why don't you keep those 2 feet still?" the filthy man whispered dangerously, bringing the gun arm closer. "Sami, don't move," she whispered, only to wait. The stair tread creaked again. But only I seemed to notice. I just barely caught sight of a figure in the shadows, though it was easy to understand what was happening. The man on the stairs was older, at least 70, and incredibly resembled Sami. The little girl's grandfather must have arrived without my captor knowing, because he had only described the family as 3 people. Grandfather was about to make a stupid move against overwhelming odds. "Wait," I interjected, hoping to buy a few seconds and think things through. "Sami here," I nodded, "can clearly incinerate anything with his bare hands. You tied me up once, then used these handcuffs as a last resort, so I assume you only have 1 pair and are saving them. Sami can burn through any metal or rope you have. This creates a problem with no easy solution. I know you came alone, and your only potential ally was injured upstairs before we arrived. How do you plan to hold these people? The best case scenario is you have to kill all of us. This will anger your employers. This assumes you're not overwhelmed and killed by one of their hidden abilities, which is very possible and even likely. But if you leave them now, you can leave with just me and come back for them another time." Grandfather had reached the last step. It creaked. The man spun around as grandfather moved impossibly fast, almost fast enough. The man shot him in midair and he slumped to the floor as his family screamed. "Dad!" Sami lunged forward. The bearded man warned, spinning around and pointing a pistol at Sami's forehead. Everyone froze. In the silence, grandfather's gasps of pain were chillingly audible. It was a gut shot. The bearded man cleared his throat, licking his lips. Pain and death are, at the best of times, not good for an old man like him. Now, Sami, are we going to be good? Sami's eyes darted between his gasping father and a fireplace poker just out of reach. "Sami, I need an answer if you want your wife's brains to stay inside her head," he pressed. Sami rolled his eyes angrily towards the man. "What do you want?" he asked through clenched teeth. My captor smiled. It takes a very special circumstance to make a smile ugly, but the man seemed to find joy in accomplishing rare and terrible feats. "I just want to take a trip, and I want to do it without any complaints from your family, and I want your sweet little girl to come out of hiding." He aimed his second gun at Tina again. "Tina, right? Call your daughter Tina. Otherwise, I'll shoot the teeth out of your cheeks and let you feel it while you're awake." Tears streamed down her face, but she remained silent. "I'm realizing I haven't introduced myself," he purred. "You can call me Seville. Tell your daughter she needs to come down here and meet me, or I'll go find her and do all the things you're afraid I'll do to her. I'll make it real." Tina swallowed. "Don't," Sami whispered. Without opening her eyes, she called, "Malosi, Mommy needs you to come down here right now." Her voice was strangely calm. The stairs creaked and a tiny face immediately appeared. "You've been with us for a while. There's a delicious little girl, Seville Genie. Now all of you need to listen very carefully because I can't have you causing a ruckus once you're in my truck. All of you will drink something that will make you sleep soundly, and old Save will take care of everything from there. Understood?" He kept his pistols aimed unflinchingly at the 2 parents. Grandfather gasped in the corner. "Oh, and your old man will be out with enough C4 to level half this structure." He nodded towards me. "Sebastian here is nothing but trouble. I had it all set up for you as a little surprise he just ruined. Anyway, the point is, there's no turning back. This house will take down the old man, and I imagine what's left of Byron upstairs will be crushed in the rubble. We'll just say everything got out of hand if anyone asks, okay, everyone?" He spat a wad of dark red mucus that quivered like jelly on the ground. Sami focused on the floor. "I came into your house because I thought a stranger, a strange family, had more good than bad." You exhaled a breath. "Most people wouldn't, I certainly wouldn't have. I was ready to kill you. I had no doubt, but you were determined to prove me wrong." Then he looked directly at me. "Thank you for that." He didn't break eye contact as he said, "You'll never see your family again. I'm right, aren't I? I think so. Seville, you'll promise just enough to get us to follow you, and it'll be too late before we realize how bad that decision was." He closed his eyes. "We'll wish we had stayed right here, said no to you from the start." He reached for the fireplace poker as it glowed bright white. "Do you really want to make your daughter watch you die?" Seville growled. "No," Sami replied calmly, snatching the poker as it glowed bright white. "I want my first death to be revenge for her father." Sami lunged. Seville fired without hesitation. Sami's head snapped back like a spring-loaded doorstop as he slumped to the floor. Multiple voices screamed. Fragmented attempts to make violent death seem glorious, but the reality of a shattered head is a very gruesome thing. I desperately wanted to close my eyes, but I needed to understand what was happening. Sami had bought enough time for his family to advance on Seville. Tina flew into the air and was rushing towards him. Malosi had charged his knee. He had almost bought enough time for them. Seville quickly understood the maneuver, and he realized there was only enough time to react to one person. He chose Tina. Her eyes widened in that final moment, but she had no time for any other physical reaction. He shot her in the forehead, knocking her out of the sky just as Malosi impacted his knee. Clearly, she had the ability to summon great physical strength because this move sent him spinning into the air, screaming as his leg twisted in directions knees shouldn't bend. He landed with a sickening, terrifying thud just as Malosi collapsed onto her mother's dead form. Malosi. I screamed, straining painfully against the handcuffs. Run! She didn't react, but Seville did, his eyes rolling. He pulled himself into a sitting position and stared at his shattered leg in shock. Let her go, I warned. She's not worth it, she's too dangerous. He looked at me and scoffed, then turned back to look at the little girl who refused to leave her mother's body. I've already figured that out, thanks, he replied dazedly, then he raised his pistol and aimed it at her. But she still has value as a corpse. I wanted to close my eyes but couldn't. He took a deep breath and prepared to fire. Some time ago, I was taught that prayer should not focus on getting the things I want. Instead, it should ask to manifest the power we always have but never know. I could finally close my eyes. I prayed. Then I opened them again, because I owed it to Malosi to witness what happened next. Each of us has the ability to do extraordinary things. It's a leap of faith to be able to believe. I believed that Seville had the power to overcome himself that night, to cast aside all elements of the path laid before him and choose what was right. The twin halves of the capacity and inclination to do good are the capacity and inclination to do evil. It wasn't wickedness that drove us from Eden, but choice. Every aspect of our instincts can be overcome. It's a truly remarkable gift that we rarely stop to digest. So it was indeed Save's own fault when he squeezed the trigger. I prayed for his own forgiveness in that moment, because if he could be saved, then the rest of us truly were blessed. Malosi, I commanded calmly, close your eyes. I didn't know if she would have enough time to follow my instructions before he shot her, but she was dead before she hit the floor. He turned and stared at me, delicately balanced on his single undamaged leg. I met his gaze. I hope that what comes next is better for all of us. I pressed through tears. He lowered his gaze, taking a few seconds to find his next words. This fucking mess is a total loss, he explained softly. I'm going to unlock you now. Here he patted his chest pocket, but first I'm going to clean up the mess. He reached into his pants pocket, fumbling with something that beeped once. The explosion was so shocking it might have knocked me to the ground if I were standing. Seville just smiled and carefully turned around. The back half of the house had been blown off, although the room we were in was relatively intact. In this moment, every window had shattered, drawing a steady breeze across my face, along the rug, past the broken chair, across a precarious support beam at the edge of the fractured floor, and into the smoking mud where the kitchen once was. Seville was speaking, but my ears were ringing too loudly to hear him at first. I said don't play petty games. His voice weakly fought through the painful buzzing in my head. I'm going to toss you the keys. You'll unlock yourself and we'll take the handcuffs back to my truck. I'll collect the bounty on your head, and we'll just tell Delora that I had no choice but to blow up the whole damn family. He looked up and tilted his head to the side, tossing his greasy hair over his shoulder. We'll gloss over the colorful details, friend, it'll be our little secret. A foul stench reached my nose then, and I almost vomited. Looking at the rubble, I could see that a small fire had started and was quickly growing. The explosion must have caused it directly or indirectly, but a broken gas line needs little encouragement to cause a major problem. Looks like we're having a barbecue tonight, Save chuckled. Best these corpses get incinerated. Corpses have a way of causing trouble when left behind. He took a deep breath. Oh my God, I love the smell of a well-done little girl. A guttural grunt of pain emanated from the rubble behind him. Confused, Seville turned around. He should have used that moment to escape. The little girl's grandfather rose, filthy, bleeding, screaming, and very angry. Seville didn't even have time to brace himself before the old man dove low into his waist, knocking the wind out of his gut and sending both of them headfirst into the only support beam. Seville's head connected with a sickening squelch, and the entire beam broke in half. A massive, smoking section of the ruin collapsed in a cloud of noise and fire and dust. I closed my eyes, gripping my white-knuckled handcuffs, knowing I would have to accept my fate if the destruction saw fit to overwhelm me. On that day, it did not. The noise stopped first, then the dust, but the fire was angrier. I stared at the mess to see if anyone had survived. Slowly, one of them emerged. All the house lights were off, and the dust was still thick. But my eyes were adjusting as the dust thinned, and the outline of this person was becoming clearer. There was certainly only one figure before me. The other must have been buried under the burning rubble. I wanted to pray for grandfather's life, but wondered if he would want to survive such an ordeal. Instead, I prayed for peace to overcome my own disgust at the violence I had witnessed that night. And as the dust settled, 5 things were clear. The first was that Seville was before me. Grandfather was nowhere to be found. I hoped he wasn't suffering. The second was that Seville's lower body had been completely crushed under the rubble. Everything below his stomach was buried under tons of debris. There would be no way to get him out without heavy machinery. The third was that he was alive and conscious. He stared, eyes wide, at his waist. Perhaps he was in the early stages of shock. I deduced that was the only thing keeping him from panicking. The fourth was that the fire had spread and was now advancing into the living room where we were all trapped. We probably had 5 or 10 minutes before the consuming flames engulfed us. The fifth was that his gun had been thrown in the chaos. I knew this because it had landed near my left hand. Although my right arm was tethered to the pipe, the weapon was within reach. I leaned over and picked it up off the ground. As the trapped man turned back to stare at me, eyes wide, finally beginning to understand how much the situation had changed, I quietly picked up the pistol off the ground as the trapped man turned back to stare at me, eyes wide, finally beginning to understand how much the situation had changed. I stared at the pistol, frowning. I examined it with disgust before glaring at the vulnerable man before me. He wants me dead. Everything that has happened here can be traced back to the power of that gun. I explained over the growing flames. The man gaped at me, hesitant in deciding whether he was consumed by a greater sense of fear or anger, still unable to recognize that they were 2 words for the same thing. Measuring imbalance with further imbalance will only create a broken scale, I continued steadily. So I ask you, Seville, what is the only way to remove the power of this weapon? I raised it high enough for both of us to see clearly. Although I wasn't aiming at him, he cringed in fear. I considered the gun for a few more moments, then tossed it across the room. He flinched as it slid to a stop right next to him. Seville greedily snatched it up, examined it, then laughed insanely at me. "That was so stupid," he muttered, unaware that blood was spewing from his mouth and flowing down his scraggly beard. "Was it?" I asked calmly as the flames drew closer. "You had the power to take my life by refusing to give me the handcuff key in your chest pocket. I clinked the chains against the metal pipe I was attached to, and having the weapon does nothing to save you from the fate you set in motion with a dozen different decisions in the last hour." I stared at him as he tried to aim the gun at me. "So I've given you nothing more than what you imagine to be true. The gun has been diffused and will no longer guide our decisions." A look of disgust appeared on his face. Then he tossed the pistol aside where it vanished into the rubble. "No choices to make anyway. This gun is empty." We sat in silent moments, trapped, each facing and assessing the other as unknown seconds ticked down with nothing good to hold them. "We're both going to burn alive," he articulated with difficulty. Although his lower body was crushed, there was relatively little blood. It seemed the rubble was acting as a temporary tourniquet, and he would not die from blood loss in this moment. The pain he felt was clearly mitigated by the continuing effects of shock. I closed my eyes and leaned against the wall. "We will return to dust. That's always how our story will end, our vacant plot at the end of the road. Do you believe in anything else?" He sneered at me. "You're a priest," he said accusingly. "Just as you say," I replied. "Why?" he pressed, a note of desperation in his voice. "Damn it, look around. You're about to burn alive because we live in a world where no one cares what happens to you." I stared intently at him. "I believe in free will, and I'll burn alive because the object of my faith is real." Another support beam collapsed near the stairs, raining ash and dust down the far side of the room. It was just far enough away for us to be intact, but it brought the flames much closer. "All I know is you're a stupid motherfucker," he spat. "You've had so many chances to get out of here, and you've refused every single one." "Yes," I nodded, "but right now you'll die alone if not for me. Is that what you want?" He tried to answer my question. He failed. Even now, Seville, the object of my faith is strong enough to dictate even our destiny. You can release me now, and your ability to choose prevents me from surviving. I am about to die for free will. What greater proof of God is there? You see me as proof of God. He asked as if I were stupid about this. I have no doubt, I replied quickly. I'll fucking kill that little girl again just to watch you suffer. He snapped at me. You, this fucking family, and God. We sat in silence for a period that lost all meaning. As the fire grew louder and the heat bore down harder, his discomfort overwhelmed him. Do you believe in hell? I believe in more, I explained. The first licks of fire at the rubble overwhelmed him. His breathing became rapid and shallow. I had a wife, a long time ago. She made a deal with some people and thought she could make up for it by killing me. Should have worked if I had trusted her completely. But I'm not that stupid. When she realized her failure, my wife jumped from the 13th story of a 19-story building just as she knew her body would fall before my eyes. She looked like a plate of lasagna when she hit the concrete and writhed in a pile of her own guts before dying. I loved her then, I still love her. But I don't believe in anything good after this life, because all I ever wanted was to ask her why. If she's in hell, then that's where I want to go. Sweat began to cover both of us. But I don't believe in hell, and I don't believe in more, Father, because there simply isn't anything that wonderful waiting for us. The only reason we create hope for a better afterlife is because the one we're living is so bad that we want to escape it. He shot a joyless smile at me. So, thank you. Both of us are about to receive the greatest wish we're too afraid to admit we crave. I raised an eyebrow. You're sure there's nothing after this? He swayed in his palms. Certain, I smiled. And there, you see, is faith. He squinted in disgust. The further we try to run from free will, the tighter we find ourselves caught in its consequences. To seek an explanation beyond our own actions is an act of faith. We can never escape these powerful dual influences of free will and faith. Paradoxically, we cannot free ourselves from the freedom of our own humanity. The fire had climbed to the top of the rubble. Seville was trying very hard to avoid looking behind him. I wish I hadn't thrown the gun, he gasped. I don't like the idea of burning alive, but I'm not ready to die by my own hand yet. However, it seemed Seville had accepted his fate, if not his faith. You want to take the quickest way out, I explained, but you see nothing but the path you've illuminated for yourself. He scoffed. All right, Father, you believe in something bigger. He smiled an unpleasant smile. If there's a hell, do you really think you don't deserve to be there? Perhaps I do, I replied quickly. I'll find out soon enough. The flames danced in his eyes as he stared at me. Will anyone remember you when you die? Will anyone care if you're in hell? I exhaled heavily. That's a tough question, Seville. Perhaps hell is about finding that out. Here's what I think. Whatever we've done with our lives can never be undone. No force allows it. That's the nature of free will. I imagine that what comes next is a complete knowledge of what we've done. Every action, every counterreaction, every ripple effect will be played out for us to know. The butterfly effect is eternal, so we will see the never-ending echoes of existence. We are made ceaseless by people who never even knew us, so I don't think the question is whether they care about me or not, because they are living the lives I left for them. But two things remain constant in that reality. The first is that the pleasures and material possessions we enjoyed will forever be separated from us. And whatever fragments of our souls we've woven into this world will be lost. The second is that no matter how great the regret, we will never be able to change the world we left behind, even though we took that ability for granted every day of our lives. I exhaled a long, slow breath. Whether that existence is heaven or hell depends entirely on your free will right now. I smiled, and I have faith. I turned to look at my bent right wrist. By the way, you didn't throw that pistol as far as you thought. It's right behind you, just within reach the whole time. I ran out of the house with flames licking at my back. The cool night air filled my salvaged lungs. Once I was a safe distance away, I slumped to the grass, gasping between sobs. As I caught my breath, I turned to look down at my palm. The handcuff key that Seville had thrown to me seemed too small to hold such consequences. I looked up at the structure, now 100 feet away, as flames poured out of the living room window. A single gunshot from inside told me it was time to stand up and make a quick escape. The distant, sustained wail of sirens confirmed this decision. I stood up and half stumbled, half jogged back to Seville's truck. Grabbing my bag from the floor, I turned and moved quickly down the road. The first police and fire units shrieked up the driveway as I rounded the corner and hid from view. I soon found myself at a crossroads. It was a physical crossroads, but it was also metaphysical. Every choice is. And in this moment, the world saw me as nothing more than a dark figure on the side of the road. No more and no less. I should have thought that quite insignificant, but the hairs on my arms stood up as a truck sped down the road. Several qualities about the way it accelerated a little too quickly told me its intent was desperate, and that did not bode well for me. So, I made a conscious decision to extinguish my anxiety just as it sought to peak. After all, I had been granted more than my fair share of blessings tonight. If someone else's misfortune bled into my lap, I would still come out ahead. The truck screeched to a halt 15 feet in front of me. I didn't know what to expect, so I expected nothing good. I was not disappointed. 4 of them surrounded me, some wielding what appeared to be wooden stakes. I wanted to assure them they would find more peace if they approached me unarmed, but there was no opportunity. One of them charged into my chest, knocking my bag to the ground and the wind out of my chest as he easily lifted me and tossed me into the truck. Honestly, he probably could have just asked me to get in. The others followed me, leaving the friend who had shoved me standing outside. "Go!" he yelled at the driver as he placed one foot inside. She wasted no time in moving the truck, and in a moment of horror, I realized I was about to witness another person die if he fell beneath the wheels. I had seen too much carnage in one night. I grabbed his arm and pulled him safely towards me. He didn't seem very strong. To be honest, I probably could have knocked him out if I wanted to, and so, he lived. I didn't have to witness another unnecessary waste, and this filled me with more joy than I am capable of expressing. He was smiling. One of them whispered in a voice they thought I couldn't hear. "I suppose you're going to force me to give you some answers now?" the man I had pulled to safety asked. He sounded anxious. I let my smile grow a little larger. I was hardly in a position to negotiate. They were a motley crew for sure, but each was united in a truly shocked, confused gaze as they stared at me. I don't think they could comprehend that I had chosen to let go of anger. "Sebastian!" he yelled at me as I began to jog away from the group. I looked over my shoulder, but I had no intention of turning back. "Good luck!" I nodded once, then turned and ran. Silhouetted against the fierce blaze was a lone man facing something. Well, something impossible. I stopped, I knelt to the ground, and I gasped for breath. Shock had carried me through more than I realized that night. It was a gift that had suddenly faded before another fire that seemed too deadly to be worth it. I could leave right here, right now. There was no reason to suffer for people who would rather hurt me than help me. I felt strong alone. I kicked alone. I searched for a reason to continue into the unknown while leaving was a certainty. I looked up at the fire. I wondered what forces wanted me comfortable and why. I thought about how easy existence is when we use our free will to keep the world unperturbed and how potent the drug of comfort truly is. I imagined spending an eternity looking back on a life of comfort. The notion of good is hard to define because it hurts so much. If the best of us ask why God has forsaken us, then what is the point of moving forward each day? Then I realized I was alone because everyone in the truck had faith in me. For better or worse, I was the linchpin. I stood up. Of course, I would eventually fail. At some point, my body would be unable to handle whatever physical challenges stood before me. This single unifying truth is perhaps the only constant for all of humanity. From a certain perspective, I had nothing to lose, but the man before me did. So I decided that it was worth stepping forward into great danger and seeing what perils awaited me at the end of the night. The letter ends here, but their story, the grandfathers, Sebastian's, this special family's, still has much left untold. My dear friends, it is very late. I, Jeff, need a moment to process what I've just read. A grandfather who used his words to save his granddaughter through a phone screen. A priest who chose faith over fear in the face of death. And a family, a very special family, who paid a heavy price for their gift. The letter was unsigned, with only a final line, "We are a very, very special family." If any of you know about this family, about the grandfather trying to protect his loved ones, or about Father Sebastian, be careful. There are forces hunting them, and perhaps in the darkness tonight, they are still running. This is Jeff. Goodbye, everyone. Lock your doors tightly before you sleep. And remember that sometimes, the most special people are the most dangerous ones to know. Hello everyone, it's me again. Jeff, still with you in this quiet late night. The sound of the night wind returns, but this time it carries something else. The smell of paranoia, of the fear of living with a stranger. If the previous story gave you goosebumps with supernatural powers, tonight's story will make you fear something much closer. The fear of sharing a room with a complete stranger. My inbox just received a rather long email from a freshman student. No name, just the subject line. I just found out how messed up my roommate is and want advice. You know, sometimes the scariest thing isn't ghosts or the supernatural, but the very people next to us every day. Let's read this letter together. Dear Show, I'm a freshman in college. I just found out how messed up my roommate is and want advice. College dorm room assignments are a great idea, aren't they? Take two awkward 18-year-old kids who have never met, move them out of their homes for the first time, strip them of everything they've ever known, add a barrel of hormones far more advanced than their social skills, then force them to live in the same damn room. Carlton is quirky enough as it is, but I'm trying my best to make things work. I'm polite enough and vigilant enough to click my keys for a good 10 seconds before opening our shared room door. I have to add that it wouldn't kill him to show me the same respect. But whatever, I've memorized his class schedule, so it's fine. I don't let it bother me. I mean, he has some strange things. Earlier this week, I was looking for my keys, and I wandered into his side of the room. I didn't mean to be nosy. But I couldn't help but notice the 3-inch thick stack of paper with random numbers written all over it. Clearly the result of hours of work, and it gave me the creeps to be honest, and it wasn't wasted effort. I found my keys under his desk. They were resting on a piece of paper with the name Adam written repeatedly in a circle around the keys. I'm Adam, by the way, but he didn't steal anything. He left the Arkansas College of Engineering, established in 1913 keychain on them. I brushed it aside. After all, Carlton is a weirdo. Last night, however, was a whole different story. We had one of those mandatory dorm community building exercises. Naturally, I was going to pretend I wasn't home, but Carlton sprang up and let the resident assistant stick his silly head into the room. He caught my eye a little too enthusiastically and declared, "Everyone's waiting." That annoyed me because I had homework, and this was going to push everything back. To be honest, I don't know what I do with most of my time. But it takes about 5 hours for me to start my homework after first sitting down, and this was going to force that cycle to start all over again. The evening's activity was a "Do you know me?" game that I thought was pretty goddamn stupid to host 3 months into freshman year. Basically, you write 10 little-known facts about yourself on a card and drop it into a box. Then everyone randomly picks a card, and you have to guess who the person is. I was forced to accept how boring my life was when I wrote, "Visited Drisking Mystery and favorite format is cheddar," as my last 2 facts. The card I randomly selected from the box was more interesting. 1. I grew up nearby in Bentonville. 2. I chose engineering, because all other subjects seemed like a waste of a life. 3. I'm attracted to my roommate. 4. I once ate my pet goldfish and regurgitated it again. It lived for 40 seconds. 5. I haven't done laundry since coming to college, but I regularly turn my underwear inside out. 6. I can observe people from my dorm room window, with less than 5% of them noticing. 7. I'm good at baking bread. 8. My roommate brought 3 separate items of Baby Gap clothing to college, but doesn't wash them regularly. 9. I'm a practicing Satanist, and am working to influence the world around me in supernatural ways. 10. Stealing everyday objects from a person can lead to an incremental influence on that person's soul. The paper smelled like Carlton. He has a very unique smell. Naturally, I excused myself to the bathroom and never returned. Instead, I went back to our room to try to regain my composure before Carlton returned. Was there anywhere else I could sleep? Amanda had stopped talking to me completely after I got a hand job from the hot Greek girl named Xenia. All the fake friendships formed during orientation had long since cooled. My parents lived in California, and I didn't have the kind of cash needed for a cheap motel. I had nowhere else to sleep but the room I shared with Carlton. I decided to turn off the lights and make the room as dark as possible so he couldn't spy on me while I slept. A column of light shone straight through the window and onto my pillow, so I walked across the room to close the curtains. That's when I discovered our room didn't have curtains. That struck me as odd, but I couldn't figure out why. But I didn't let that distract me as I took off my clothes, tossed my underwear to the floor, and pulled on a fresh pair of boxers before quickly jumping into bed. A chill slowly crawled down my spine like a cold, furry tongue. When Carlton opened the door, he stopped at the threshold, then slid the deadbolt behind him. I pretended to be asleep as I listened to him move around the room. His footsteps were almost inaudible. I could only trace his approximate location through his breathing. He blocked the light, and that's when I understood what was strange. The light never shone on my pillow when I slept. I always assumed Carlton had drawn the curtains. What had actually happened, as I realized in that moment, was that Carlton had blocked the light by standing next to my bed. Due to the darkness and my usual sleepy state, it had been impossible to discern that truth, and his footsteps had been so light. But while I was pretending to be asleep last night, listening very intently to his breathing, it was clear he was standing very close. He must have been standing very close most nights. It was hard to pretend to be asleep when you were sure your heart was about to break every rib from the inside. But I didn't move for 3 hours. Neither did he. I breathed a sigh of relief when the column of light finally shone on my pillow again, but I didn't sleep that night. Carlton was sitting at his desk when I finally ventured out of bed, staring intently at a book on his lap. He didn't turn the page or look up at any point. I'm very sensitive, so I check everything very thoroughly. That's when I noticed the wet, slimy goo clinging to the pair of underwear I had left by my bed. They were my underwear, but it certainly wasn't my goo. I immediately reduced my clothing count to 72 items. I left the room and haven't returned since. Any advice would be appreciated. I have to go back to the room at some point, and I don't know what to do if all my clothes are in the trash. I decided to do something. I wish I hadn't. Or I don't know. Damn it, it seemed like the best idea at the time. So I went back to the room to see what was going on. It turns out I really shouldn't have broken the balance by leaving Carlton alone for more than 12 consecutive hours. You see. Like most freshmen, we spend most of our social time in our rooms. Even the night I got the hand job from Xenia saw me return at 7:13 p.m. Damn it, that had already disrupted things enough. I went home and found Carlton also getting a hand job. I really wish there was a second person with him. That's why changing routines was a bad idea. So I clicked my keys for 20 seconds before entering this time. He was still reading that book. I could tell from the illustration in the corner that he was looking at the same page that had occupied his undivided attention the previous day. I wanted to expose him. I wanted to ask him why, but I suddenly realized why. In a flash, I understood that it was his cover to spy on me from the corner of his eye. My heart pounded, my chest felt like it was boiling, and I was ready to explode. I opened my mouth, unsure of what was about to spill out. I turned to face him directly and took a deep breath. I stopped. He was wearing my shirt, my sleep shirt. Dizziness came over me as I tried to process the incongruous sight of my clothing against Carlton's greasy, acne-ridden skin. With effort, I peeled my eyes off the shirt. But I stopped at his shorts, or lack thereof. I didn't notice immediately because male freshmen are pretty disgusting, and it's hard for immediate disgust to stand out. But he was only wearing a pair of boxers. They were my boxers. I had slept in them last night. The sensation of a cold, furry tongue completed its descent down my spine and anchored itself to my anus. He was sitting so still that I was aware of every tiny movement. And when I noticed his blooming erection, I decided it was time to leave. I burst out the door into the cold autumn night and took a few deep breaths. I felt the bushes behind me, then quickly ran towards the courtyard, startled out of my panic that someone was hiding in them. But once I found myself in the exposed air, unable to look in all directions at once, the panic only increased. I had to get out. Permanently. I didn't want any lingering doubts when I told the RA, the Dean of Housing, the university president, anyone and everyone, that this goddamn psychopath needed to be as far away from me as possible. There was more than enough evidence. My stomach dropped. I had to get the evidence. I had to go back to the room. I looked back at the Humphreys building looming above me like a goddamn roommate waiting to soil the underwear my mother bought me for college. I wiped my tears and swallowed the nausea. This had to be quick. No light was spilling around the door frame, so I assumed Carlton had completed his creepy nightly routine and gone to bed. Since I wasn't in the room, my guess was he was actually in his bed instead of standing strangely near mine. To be safe, I took off my shoes and decided to enter the room barefoot. Not everyone can be naturally stealthy like Carlton. I opened the door, slipped silently inside, and stepped into the darkness. The faint light from the column lamp was just enough to provide a vague sense of direction. Like most rooms in Humphreys, the interior layout mostly consisted of piles of papers and piles of clothes. Clearly, neither of us actually cleaned. Something felt different about the floor. What the hell had he done to this place in just a few extra hours? I lifted my foot to brush the sharp stimuli from the soles of my feet, but instead of crumbling to the ground, they smeared like tiny egg yolks. Sharp fragments, freely mixed with thick, jelly-like streaks across my bare feet. What the hell could be on my bedroom floor? Nausea rushed over me. He must have picked his nose and dropped the boogers on the floor by my bed. I was stepping on what was clearly many hours of work. Considering how much material I was feeling, I could only imagine how much blood he had mixed in, considering how much he must have picked to create such a batch. I took a shallow gasp. Carlton's grinning face lit up from across the room. He was shining his phone light straight up, making his head appear to float in the darkness. The shock was enough to make me lose my balance since I had been standing on one foot. The shift caused me to totter. I landed on the disgusting stuff on the floor. As I scrambled to get up, Carlton swung the light directly into my face, blinding my efforts. I raised my hands to block the beam and felt boogers fall from my hands in tiny avalanches. Unable to see, I turned my head away from the phone. My eyes were now working correctly. Of course, I was looking directly behind me into a space of the room that Carlton was illuminating. He had done a little decorating while I was away. Adam was written on the door in red marker hundreds of times. A gasp, a scream, and a bout of vomit collided on their way out of my throat. The only thing that escaped was a tiny hiccup. I willed my unresponsive body. Time stretched horizontally. The mattress groaned as he climbed out of bed and stood behind me. That was enough to get me moving. I leaped to my booger-covered feet and sprinted to the door, now serving as a shrine to my name. I don't know how long Carlton had been following me, but I only slowed down enough to grab my shoes, and I didn't stop running until I reached the resident assistant's door. Matt. I screamed, pounding on the frame. Matt, let me in right now. I didn't want to look behind me. I didn't want to know if my roommate was following. Standing still went against every instinct I had, but I was certain I would be safe if Matt just let me in. The entire hallway was completely silent, exactly as silent as my room when Carlton stood over me unseen. Seriously, not a sound. Click. The Ra's door opened, and an eye peered through from the other side. I lunged in, almost breaking his nose with the force of the door, then slammed and locked it behind me. I was trying to figure out where to start when I realized I had been babbling nonsense since the door opened. Oh, slow down, Adam. Matt was looking at me with a mixture of deep concern and deep pity. What are you talking about, a roommate? Carlton? I sputtered. My roommate Carlton is a danger to himself and to me. I tried to catch my breath as Matt looked down at me sadly. That's why, Adam? I looked at him as if he had two heads. That's why what? An awkward silence stretched between us. Finally, Matt sighed heavily. That's why your housing conditions are special. Adam, we can't put you in a normal living situation if you choose to create elaborate lies. He reached past me and unlocked the door. Dishonesty hurts the community. Both you and I know there's no Carlton. You need to go back to your room. I walked back in a daze, robot-like. I didn't even bother to brush the last of the boogers from the soles of my feet. I simply let them crunch and squish between my toes with each step as I slowly made my way to my demonic room. What were my choices? I wouldn't accept the idea that I might be crazy, and I wouldn't entertain the thought that some dorm demon was playing a trick on me. No, my roommate nightmare was very real, and I would make sure everyone knew it. I didn't care what kind of goddamn game my roommate and the Ra were playing. I was going to force this issue, no matter how far these psychopaths decided to go. It was time to video a couple of crazies. I had absolutely no desire to spend any more quality time with Carlton. There are some grinders you just shouldn't stick your dick in. I plunged my hand into my pocket for my phone. The liner was a bit tea-stained and my underwear a bit soiled. I quickly rushed into a nearby bathroom, locked myself in a stall, and took off my underwear. I took a deep breath and held them up for inspection. I cried a little. There were tiny pentagrams drawn all over the inside of my underwear. I had been in constant contact with Carlton's artwork. That's how I got down to 7 items of clothing. Now without underwear, I proceeded out of the Humphreys building and circled my dorm. I stopped at the first-floor window of our bedroom. I suspected Carlton was used to being watched from the other side. Crouching down below the glass, I pulled out my phone and scrolled to the video function. The position was tucked tight between a thick bush and the Humphreys wall, so I was confident I would be out of sight. That notion would come back to me only a few minutes later. I had pivoted my hips and dug my fingers into the damp earth while trying to find a comfortable position in the small space under our shared window. I was fiddling with my phone camera, determined to have the perfect settings before placing it in the ideal position to record all of Carlton's goddamn antics. There are moments when we suddenly realize we've heard, seen, or tasted something very wrong, or smelled it. How did I not immediately recognize the smell of semen? Oh my God, it had been a daily experience for me since Xenia said, "I don't think it's worth a second date." I tried not to vomit as I looked down. I was sitting on a pile of used, stiff toilet paper. I hadn't seen it in the dark, and the earth I had been unconsciously caressing with my fingers was almost entirely dry. Except for the puddle my fingers had been caressing. I frantically wiped my hands on my shirt as I finally understood the comment. "I can observe people from my dorm room window with less than 5% of them noticing," by Carlton. But rubbing it on my shirt only brought the smell closer to my nostrils, so I stopped. You know what? I fucking get Carlton. My thoughts were interrupted by my roommate's voice echoing through the window. "Why don't you come inside?" The shock almost made my testicles slide right out of my scrotum. Could he smell me through the wall? "We need to talk," the raw Matt's voice replied as the door closed. That bastard came to talk to Carlton right after calling me crazy. I started recording and carefully placed it on the windowsill. "Can you put some pants on?" Matt's voice, shy and much more discreet than his usual cheerful or suffer the consequences raw style. Carlton continued as if he hadn't heard Matt's request. "Adam is really getting on my nerves. He's been invading my personal space. Then after finding things worthy of praise, he acts strange about it, and he's been stealing my bodily fluids." An awkward silence stretched. I imagined Matt struggling to find an appropriate response to such a statement. "Listen, Carlton, I realize you have a very special interest in your roommate, but this isn't sustainable, and I don't understand why you want me to lie to him about you imagining. It's just weird." Carlton, he sounded so tired that I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. I can't have him spreading baseless complaints about me just because I find him interesting. Bitches like him would whine about my hobbies all the time in my previous academy, and it ruined my high school experience. I've decided not to tolerate this unfair behavior anymore. Besides, he continued, lowering his voice threateningly, the only thing you really need to understand is that your role is one of complete obedience. He made a snorting sound through his nostrils, ending with a distinctive thud from a heavy booger shooting free. I heard Matt jump out of the projectile's path and stumble to regain his balance, but he didn't utter a single word of protest to Carlton. "Because we wouldn't want me to tell Dad about your little homosexual relationship 2 weeks ago, would we?" The heavy silence stretched. "So?" Carlton asked dismissively. "No," Matt whispered. "Do you mean no because I'm Matt and I'm a little homosexual bitch, right?" The silence continued to beckon Matt to let out a tiny sob. "No," he croaked, almost inaudibly. "Because I'm Matt and I'm a little homosexual bitch." He sobbed again. "Good," Carlton retorted, sounding like another finger was deep in his nostril. "Because I need you to know your place. Now I have to deal with Adam, who's hiding outside the window and recording everything we're saying. Why would my roommate have any reason to let me sit outside the window, pretending not to notice me as I rolled around in his semen? I realized I had answered my own question. I was dislodging myself from the bushes as footsteps ran down the walkway in my direction. Every hair on my body stood on end as the sound came to a screeching halt directly behind me. "We're gasping, Matt," out of breath. "Have to talk." He grabbed my elbow and led me towards the Humphreys door. Dazed with shock, I obediently followed the Roz lead straight back to my demonic room. Looking back, I think that was a bad choice. The first thing I noticed when I entered the room was another pair of underwear on the floor. Once again, they were my underwear. But the thick, dark stain running from the back label to the crotch area was not made by me. It was made by someone who had taken my underwear and soiled them, then turned them inside out after he was done and left them on the ground. I looked up at Carlton. He was laughing loudly as if I were the last idiot to finally get a joke. "So you've noticed a hobby I have with you, Adam," he said, scratching at his waist, lifting my stolen shirt to reveal his excessively hairy stomach. As his long fingernails created a scratching sound against his skin, a steady rain of belly-button lint fell to the floor. It smelled like sadness. Carlton squinted at me. "Nothing," he growled dismissively. I found myself at a loss for words. "Why?" He rolled his eyes and snapped his fingers at Matt. "Both of you get out there. I'll answer all the questions you have." It would probably have been wiser to refuse his offer, but I desperately wanted to know what the hell was going on. "Okay," I offered tentatively. "I'll go out, but only if you put some pants on." I turned towards the door before stopping and quickly turning back to him. Only if you put your asterisk pants on, Carlton. I glared at him in disgust. You can keep the shirt and underwear. I shook my head. $699 is fine with me too. Once he had dug a pair of jeans from the bottom of his dirty laundry basket and tucked something into his pocket, all three of us walked a block down William Street past the 1913 building. The strange road was devoid of other people, and the scant moonlight that existed was almost completely obscured by clouds. As the road ended at Duncan, Carlton walked across a lawn towards a few trees. Matt and I each had our own motivations for following him. While the Raw was facing blackmail, I was desperately looking for a way out of my living situation. Considering how much unknown leverage Carlton held, I decided it was best to play his game and get it over with. And I wanted some damn answers, so I focused on ending this. I realized too late where my roommate had led us. He turned around and laughed loudly in the moonlight. The effect was like a spoonful of madness on a freshly baked, terrifyingly flavored treat. We've been living together for 3 months, Adam. How are you so stupid? You know I'm attracted to you. You know I'm a practicing Satanist and am working to influence the world around me in supernatural ways. And I told you that stealing everyday objects from a person can lead to an incremental influence on that person's soul. He tilted his head to the side and changed his voice to sound like a castrated trumpet. Have I gained influence over your soul yet? I think so, Adam. Everything I've tried so far has worked. Now I decided it was time to leave. I turned to walk away, to run, to sprint until the smell of Carlton's supernatural influence was far behind me. I was also right about everything concerning the faggot. He purred, and Matt's hand gripped my bicep with a vice-like hold. I stood rooted to the spot, so I'm sure this little experiment will work out quite nicely. He raised his hands, spread them wide, and looked at the moon above. The full moon will fall on the winter solstice this year. The time has come. What? I interrupted him. That's not Satanism, that's... Silence, he shrieked, eyes wide as ping-pong balls. I'm an engineer, Adam. I'm an engineer, and I'm going to cure the faggot. How did I let things get so bad? Clearly, anything can be accepted with incremental change. Listen, Carlton, Matt offered timidly. I appreciate the gesture, but I really don't want to be cured. You don't know that. You don't get to decide what happens here. His eyes darted back and forth between us, and the air seemed to be heating up. I will cure life with death, and death with life. Adam, the progenitor of all things good and bad, will serve his purpose. I will take your life, Matt, then kill Adam and bring you back to life in his body, pure and heterosexual. Don't worry, I checked Adam's browsing history. He's not gay at all. Even the hentai tentacles have naked women drawn in them. All right, stop, I yelled, pulling free from Matt's grip. This has gone too far. Carlton, you need a psychiatrist, a doctor, a priest. That thing is more than what we can offer. I'm done with you. I'm done with our shared dorm room. And I'm done with this goddamn cemetery? I took 2 steps away before Carlton reached out and pressed my chest. My blood immediately boiled, and I actually wondered if I could stop myself from punching his goddamn teeth out. You're not going anywhere, he declared with a strange calm. Then he took 3 quick steps back and pulled out the object he had concealed in his jeans pocket. My blood froze as I realized what it was. Because if you're as sane as you claim to be, you'll do exactly as you're told by the man holding a gun to your head. My primary concern was not peeing myself. When that failed, my secondary concern became minimizing the amount I peed myself. I found moderate success, thankfully. I was almost out of underwear. I understood the importance of keeping my roommate calm. I had to thread the needle between making him feel heard while still being firm about the need to resolve the situation logically. I opened my mouth, determined to achieve that delicate balance. What's wrong, Carlton? My insightful gaze didn't seem to be working. His left eye twitched in the moonlight, and he turned his head at a worrisome 5-degree angle past normal. Then he spun around and aimed at Matt's crotch. Whoa, slow down, damn it. Matt threw up both hands, covering his penis. Carlton laughed wildly. You can't be a sexual deviant if you don't have genitals, can you, Mr. Matt? He squinted one eye and focused the other on aiming at Matt's privates. No, Matt gasped. Listen, just try shooting him first. My mind reversed. It's no use killing me now. Matt's voice gradually adopted the tone of an overly enthusiastic raw. A vacant look crept onto Carlton's face. I froze as I realized he was considering the wisdom of Matt's words. Slowly, he rotated his eyes towards me. He grinned like the goddamn Grinch. I tried to move my legs, but they were a dozen Viagras short of ready performance. So God help me, I tried to reason with him. Why? Why are you doing this, Carlton, all of it? My voice was so small I almost cried hearing my own words. Am I not a good roommate? Carlton's eye twitched again. At first, I didn't think he would say anything. When he did, it was a bit too rambling to stay coherent. Why does everyone keep asking me that? His shoulders twitched. Everyone gets weird when I borrow their clothes or sprinkle my toenails in the cafeteria salad dressing or lick their roommate's forehead when they're asleep. He grinned wider. Curious people are the weird ones, Adam. How do we know vaccines work or microwaves can cook food if we're not willing to see what mucus tastes like on a bagel? I'm an engineer because I'm not afraid. I'm a Satanist because I'm not afraid. And I'm going to experiment with necromancy because I'm not afraid. The world will remember me one way or another, Adam, and that's more than I can say about you. Many things happened at once. Carlton stopped speaking as Matt tackled him. Both growled and fell to the ground while I adopted the role of staring, jaw agape. I didn't know whether to help or run away. To be honest, I was still pretty pissed that Matt had requested my execution. My thoughts were interrupted by a gunshot, but it was almost impossible to see what was happening in the darkness. I'm sorry, Matt. I didn't mean to hurt you. A second gunshot rang out and a figure slumped to the ground in front of me. A hand gripped my ankle. Adam, Matt gasped. All sense of logic and priority vanished. Paralyzed, I pulled out my phone and shone the light down. Matt was a mess, his entire upper body drenched in blood, and a gaping bullet hole in his chest was mangled. Pale as paper and eyes wide, he looked at me without seeing. Don't tell my dad I'm gay. He slumped down and the world fell silent. I swung the phone around, searching for Carlton in the darkness. The intensity of the phone's light made everything outside the beam appear completely black. I darted from gravestone to gravestone, searching for any sign of Carlton. I found none. Then I noticed a trail of blood on the ground. I followed it inch by inch until it disappeared around a granite slab. Carlton's grinning face appeared around the corner. I fucking ran. I kept weaving through the gravestones, not knowing where I was going, not knowing if Carlton was following. The beam of light shot back and forth in the darkness as I swung my arm, illuminating the ground in front of me in pulses like a strobe light. I noticed the waist-high fence too late. Half a second. I leaped and almost made it over, just barely catching the toe of my shoe on the edge and flipping headfirst onto the asphalt on the other side. I felt a fleeting moment of testicular freedom as the ground rushed up to meet me. With a sickening thud, my face hit the pavement. I didn't just feel the pain, I became one with it as I lifted my head to scream. I was sure broken teeth would spew out like stray corn kernels. I was silenced by the sight of a car screeching to a halt in front of me, its brakes squealing. It slowed, slowed, slowed. All metal shrieked an angry exhaust. It just barely touched my chest before it stopped. I slumped to the ground, emotionally shattered but still alive. I couldn't say the same for my underwear. It was the Fayetteville police car that almost pulverized me. They had been called after the gunshots and were therefore approaching the cemetery without lights or sirens. The impact to my chest left me with a minor bruise, which was the least of all the bad things that happened that night. Matt and Carlton were both dead. Matt lay on the ground where I left him, but Carlton had crawled out of the cemetery and was almost to the Casigma fraternity house before bleeding to death. No one knew how he lost his pants. Matt was remembered as a hero. I never told anyone about his sexual orientation, even though he had tried to kill me. Carlton had left a will, believe it or not. He bequeathed his body to science, and his brain now sits in a jar at the University of Arkansas Medical School. They did, however, dispose of his nose hair collection. I kept all that, but my face was swollen and disgusting for a few weeks. All things considered, things ended pretty well for me. The university gave me a straight A for psychological trauma, so I got to relax for the rest of the semester. That was a pretty good way to enjoy my new single occupancy room. That fact, combined with a tense story to share, made me quite popular. In fact, Xenia started talking to me again. She's coming over tonight. I bought a bottle of hand lotion for the occasion. And although doing laundry without underwear is a bit awkward, I decided it was important enough to wash my last pair of underwear. My friends, that was a terrifying story in a completely different way. No ghosts, no supernatural, just an ordinary freshman student trapped with a dangerous psychopath. Carlton is dead, Matt is dead, and Adam, the sender of the letter, finally escaped. But will he truly escape those memories? Will he be able to sleep peacefully without seeing Carlton standing by his bed, blocking the column of light? The most terrifying thing here is its authenticity. How many of us have had a weird roommate? How many have ignored warning signs until it was too late? The letter was unsigned, with only a final line. 699 is fine with me too. If you're living in a dorm, remember to lock your doors, trust your instincts. And if your roommate starts acting strange, don't wait until you find your name written hundreds of times on the door. It's really late. I need a moment to process this story. Perhaps you do too. This is Jeff. Goodbye, everyone, from the Late Night Whispers. Stay safe, stay vigilant, and remember that sometimes the monsters don't hide under the bed, they sleep in the bed next to you. Have a good night.